Good evening and welcome to Speaker's Corner UK. And we are back with another review, this time of James SC, who is on one of the Muslim live streams called The Arena. Have a look. The link is in the description if you want to go watch the full 3-hour stream. We're highlighting, as we did, perhaps I think it was last week, a couple of the interactions that are more of interest to us. We typically do interactions with atheists and Muslims rather than Christians and Muslims because they tend to fight over which book is the best, and that's not as much of an interest to us. And on that note, a very good evening to my, as always, co-host. Good evening, Stop Spamming.
Hi, good evening, everybody. How's it going?
Hopefully all is well. Hopefully all well on your side, sir.
Yeah, staying away from COVID.
Good evening to the viewers as well, if you're watching us now live, and also a good evening or a hello if you are watching this as a recording. So James SC joined will join in a moment, the Muslim stream. So these guys run different streams on different days of the week. And James SC was persona non grata for a while because he threatened to burn the Quran as a show of free speech, or what's the word? Not free, well, kind of free speech, but certainly freedom of expression. And he never actually did that, or certainly hasn't done it up until now. And the Muslims decided to, at least some of them decided to take offense at that. So that was his unforgivable crime. But eventually he was allowed onto this particular stream because, well, this allows all comers and they just want to refute everybody that comes on. So we're going to jump straight in just before James starts, and we'll have a nice little intro to this part. So I think, unless you've got anything else to say, Stops, we'll get straight into it.
Well, let's just spend 20 seconds on this. This is about a channel run by a ginger convert who has decided to go professional Muslim and is now doing very little else. And he's chucking out stuff like left, right, and center. Arena is one of the things because they fancy themselves as a kind of a like aggressive dawah channel, but they're actually catering for the let's say more simple Muslims who don't really appreciate a lot of thinking and stuff like this. So he's pushing out like 1 or 2 of these live streams every single day now, and he's just got different names for them, and that's it. So Arena is just one thing that they've come up with. This is why they call them the gladiators who are there, which are just as easy to refute as always. So it's quite funny. It's nothing for the intellectual mind. It's just, fun to look at them and to take them apart.
Yeah, indeed. So on that note, shall we get straight on into it? I'm just popping a link there. Great. Okay, so let us get straight into the video. So this is just before James SC joins. So, and again, of course, Stop Spamming will just shout loudly when he wants me to stop. Otherwise, I'll just stop and comment. So at the moment, we have 4 quote-unquote gladiators: Hamza, Isadullah Ali, Adnan Rashid, and
He's really picked the right ones.
Yeah, I didn't think he had a choice in it, but yes, it's going to be an interesting one. So he hasn't yet joined. Just to set the scene, he hasn't yet joined. Obviously, Hamza can see him in backstage, as it's called, with StreamYard, so you can see the people that want to join, but they haven't yet come live to the audience. So this is just before James SC joins. So here we go.
We got the next one coming on the panel. I'm going to give him a chance. And James, I know you're from Speaker's Corner. You've done some horrible things there. You seem to be intellectually dishonest. Don't come on making things personal. Come on and make your point.
So isn't that just a wonderful poisoning of the well before anybody starts? He's done some horrible things. If you had to ask him what horrible things he's done, you'd probably get, as I mentioned, that he threatened to burn a Quran that he would own, which is his own freedom of expression. It may not be something that I would necessarily do, but I certainly support his right to do it, just as I support the right of a Muslim if they wanted to buy a poppy and burn that in Speaker's Corner, as a freedom of expression against the British troops or whatever it might be. So I think we've got to be fair, but more so, this is just to highlight the poisoning of the well before he even starts. So he's already told the audience what a terrible person this is before they've opened their mouth and said anything.
Good evening, panel members.
Good evening.
Okie dokie. I know. I won't comment on I know your impression of me, so let's get into the meat and potatoes.
Cool.
Yeah, I've got a problem with a Quran verse, and so I know. Can I tell you like what I think the problem is?
Go ahead.
Make your claim, make your point, and I'll carve it up, and then we'll deal with it.
In chapter 2, verse 282, it gives the instructions for believers on what to do when sort of writing out a financial debt contract. So it says, "O you who have believed, when you contract a debt for a specified term, write it down." And then
Rob,
it goes on to say,
can you just stop here? This is something that we have touched on again and again and again. Do not go and tell people what it says in the Quran. Go and ask them. Go and say, go to sentence chapter 2, 282, and tell me what it says according to your understanding. Because otherwise you're going to be in endless discussions what the Quran actually says, unless you have them tell you what it says, and then you can discuss this. The point remains the same. It's just that there's going to be no argument about you not speaking Arabic, about you not understanding it and things like that. It puts you in a much, much stronger position, just right off the bat.
Okay, and I guess what you could also say is they might not have the verse to hand. So I suppose, as you say, maybe it could be a case of, hey, I'm not so sure about this verse or something like this. Can you explain it to me? I'm going to read you the verse, and can you guys give me your understanding?
Or like
because they won't necessarily have it to hand. So like you said, that could be a slightly different way. I suppose one thing we can say for James is he's obviously taken some time like you have, so you guys are better prepared, and you can, I think what the advice you're making is very good general advice, especially for people who are less well-read than perhaps yourself or James SC, for example, not to make those claims and to ask them what they think. You guys, on the other hand, again, because you have more expertise, you could do it the other way around, but I think that is sound advice for just about everybody. And even in this case, you could tweak the way you did it. But I think James has obviously got the information in the background, as would you have as well, so that you could make it in that way and you could present it. But you're right, it's going to get into the long grass, but we'll see very shortly how they attempt to deal with this.
Say a little later in the verse, and bring two witnesses, or rather bring to witness two witnesses from among your men. And if there are not two men available, then a man and two women from those whom you accept as witnesses, so that if one of them, i.e. the women, errs, then the other can remind her. Okie dokie. And so, like...
What do you think that verse is saying?
Exactly, this is the
think
point.
it's...
Yeah, there you go. So what exactly what you said, and you haven't watched this, have you? Or if you have,
no, I haven't.
You probably haven't watched, don't remember it. So now he's asked James what he thinks it's saying, right? So James is going to potentially give his scenario, and then they're going to critique his scenario. And what you're saying stops is to say to him, hey, I'm going to read this verse. Can you guys give me what you understand by this? So that you're not giving your scenario first.
Exactly.
Okay, I understand, yeah.
It's saying that, to all those who believe, which means the Muslims, whenever they want to write out a financial contract, like a debt, that one of the steps they have to take is to get some witnesses, and those witnesses can either be two men or a man and two women. And so that seems to me to be kind of like it doesn't make sense, because whereas back in olden times, women wouldn't have maybe as much sort of education or experience with financial matters. Nowadays, women have just as much education as men in most countries.
Right, so I have understood your point. You're saying in the verse of the Quran,
there's another problem. So, and the other problem is that, psychology shows us that women have just as good on average memory.
I just want to go with your claim first. So what you're saying, there's a verse in the Quran that indicates that witnesses to a financial contract, if it's a woman, there needs to be two women equal to one man. And you think that's a problem because
it does.
Okay, so just a quick side note here. If you are going to summarize a person's position, then pay attention to the whole position first so that you can actually summarize. Because James did say exactly why he finds that a problem, that by today's standards, women have that education and it's no longer a problem. So even if he granted it in the old days, women were less educated and may not have had the ability to do this for whatever reason. Today, he doesn't feel that's the case. So if Hamza wants to do this, then make sure that you can represent it, because immediately the fact that he stops now tells us that he hasn't either listened or remembered to that reasonably short claim that James has made.
And another piece of psychology here, if I may, turn it around. Always say, should I repeat it again for you? To make sure that you have already said it, and he is the one who doesn't get it. And this is why it's subtle. Okay, there's nothing grand about this. It's just you're making a subtle point, showing the audience, which are the Muslims, that you have made your point, and Hamza is the one who doesn't get it.
Yeah. So you could also say, okay, I just did explain it. What part did you miss?
Well, I'll be happy to explain it to you again. It's always to you. Yeah. You need to make sure that you point that out.
Yeah, because it could be that the other Muslims do actually have heard it, but because he's sort of running the show here, they're keeping quiet. But I'm sure if you asked probably Asadullah Ali, maybe even Sadat, I don't know about Adnan, he looks quite sleepy there. So the other two may well have followed that, and they wouldn't need it repeating to them. So this whole idea of trying to summarize it, I don't think is necessary unless you were somebody like Hamza that didn't get it in the beginning. But then it's unhelpful that he's doing the summarizing. Then you'd rather actually ask the Muslim that can remember it and can summarize it to do it for everybody else. But I just think that this isn't helpful. Unless the Muslims go, I have no clue, Hamza, could you please summarize that? And I don't think any Muslims or very few of the panelists are going to necessarily pipe up and say that. So this whole summarizing thing, I know he wants to do it to go, hey, people normally make a long story and I want to summarize it. But as we've just seen here, that doesn't work very well when you are given a short version of it and there's no need to summarize it. And when then you attempt to do so, you can't actually remember the entire part that you're supposed to be summarizing.
I remember a video, by the way, while I'm seeing this, where I actually caught Ali Dawa with his finger up his nose.
Okay.
Sense like there's
does it make sense in what way?
Because women are just as capable of being witnesses to financial contracts as men are,
right?
And just as high intelligence on average and just as good memory on average as men, psychologically speaking. That's the research.
No, that's your rationale for kicking in there. Yeah, you're trying to understand the verse using your own rationale as to why this is the case, isn't it?
Okay. Well, there are few.
Well, whose other rationale are you going to use? So you're going to initially use yours. If you need to appeal, and he did appeal to some studies there in terms of, or at least passing studies, and knowing James, you probably have some of those studies available as well. He is appealing to studies about, the equality in sort of memory and capability of modern women and modern men. So yes, it is he's using his rationale ultimately. But what else are you going to use? Somebody else's rationale? No, you'd start with yours, and then if you need to find out whether in fact your rationale is right or wrong, you would go and look at some studies, or indeed you'd call into the show. So saying it's his rationale is a trivial point. I mean, anybody that opens their mouth is presumably using their rationale to start with.
Few assumptions. There are few assumptions. The first assumption is that women are not equal to men. Where is that in the verse?
Well, it gives
Go on.
I'm sorry, what is this? He's just read the bloody thing. What kind of a question is this? It says either 2 men or 1 man and 2 women. That's what it says. Why are you saying, where do you get this idea from? He's just read the bloody thing. I can't believe this.
Yeah, so again, using your sort of lingo at the moment, it might be a case of, Adnan, I just read the verse. What do you understand by that verse? Where it's 1 man and 2 women. What do you, Adnan, understand? Because you're saying it's assumption. So presumably, am I wrong in assuming? And if so, what does the verse say by your lights? So that's another way, as you say, that you can put it back on them. It's the attempt here by Adnan is that James is making a leap in his thinking. But as you pointed out, he's just read the verse and commented on the verse. Now, if his comments are somehow a leap, then the question for Adnan is, you're saying he's made some presuppositions. What presuppositions has he made, and why do you believe that they aren't justified?
Yeah, and this actually shows the validity of my initial point that I was making. Because if he had not done this, and if he had asked Hamza or Adnan or somebody to tell him what this means, we wouldn't be anywhere near this, because then he could turn around and say, yeah, but hang on, you told me. You just told me that it's either 1 and 1 or 1 plus 2. You just read this. You should understand it, not me. You explained it to me, not the other way around. And this shows how important this is, this reverse psychology.
And just on another note, I can't see the chat stop. So if you see James NC in the chat and he wants to join, let us know. Also, if there's anything there that's of interest in the chat, then you can ping it up on screen, because I'm out at the moment at a client, and so, well, somewhere out and about where I'm sitting, so I can only see the live stream. I can't see.
Okay,
sorry, I can only see the recording. Right? Sorry?
This you can see.
I can't see anything at the moment. All I'm looking at is the main one. I have to flip back to see something, so I'm going to rely on your eyes. Sorry?
Okay, then I'll do it. Max Foster says, do the Dawa team make much money through their preaching? Yes, they do. Christian preachers, social influencers can make money through building online audiences. Well, we saw last week that somebody like David Wood is making something like 23 or 25,000 every single month through Patreon alone. So there's a lot of money involved here. So I would imagine that somebody like Hamza is making more than double than what he was making in his little shop there, because here there's a lot of like Muslims who don't like these high-level discussions, who appreciate the low-level kind of a confirmation that they are getting from these people here. And this is why they are more than willing to donate a lot of their money. I mean, I can't imagine that these are professionals. I would imagine these are exactly the delivery guys and the normal working guys. But they will allocate a certain amount of their income to this kind of a Dawa effort. So yeah, there's a lot of money involved here.
It just says that you either need two men, or you need a man and 2 women, and so
why do we need 2 men?
Well, to witness the contract, right?
Why 2? Why 2?
Well, that's just what they say. I guess it's more reliable than 1 if you have 2 witnesses, right?
Thank you. Okay. This is exactly what I'm saying about women.
No, Adnan. No, Adnan. It's not, Adnan. Maybe that's why it's not good to bring you the inheritance verse either, because you can't count, my friend. It's not 2 women. It's 1 man plus 2 women, or 2 men. That's not the same, Adnan. I appreciate maths is not your strong point, but saying thank you to a point that's actually refuting what you think you're making a point to doesn't sort of reflect particularly well here.
But then why?
It's just more reliable to have 2 women.
But
why 2 men.
But why do you need a man and 2 women? That's saying.
Boom. There we go. Why do you need a man and 2 women?
Because in Islam, men and women are segregated.
Okay,
so women.
What a ridiculously stupid response. They segregated. So what? What does that mean? Why do you need 2 women? But at best, all you're saying is you need 1 woman and 1 man segregated. The fact that they segregated, it's like a non sequitur, right? It doesn't follow that because the genders are segregated, that therefore you need 2 women to 1 man. I mean, the line, but this is, it's sad that the level of, irrational thinking is just, it's mind-boggling, isn't it?
Women hang around with women, men hang around with men. Even in mosque, when we pray, women have a separate section and men have a separate section. So in Islam, this is the answer.
You didn't give an answer. You provided a non sequitur. Hey, people are segregated. James's question is, why would there be 1 man and 2 women as opposed to 2 men? And your response is because they're segregated. One doesn't follow from the other. My word.
Well, I don't. So what I don't understand about that answer is, okay, let's say women and men need to be separated, okay. But if women were just as reliable as witnesses as men, then surely it would suffice to have 4 witnesses to the contract, just 2 women. But it says that you need to have a man and 2 women, right? Whereas if you only have then it would only be 2 men.
Just like you need 2 men. You just said for reliability. You just agreed. So to have reliability, you need 2 men. Otherwise, 1 man would be enough. So that means 1 man is half the witness.
What is this guy saying? Holy crap. Please, somebody come in and save the day here. Because this is just diabolically bad. What
There's
on
a
earth are you
question.
babbling here?
There's a question from the chat. Do you think? Oh, let me just put this on the screen. Sorry. Do you? Oh shit! I'm too slow. Do you think Adnan is good at history? Now, he likes to think of himself as an intellectual, and he calls himself a historian. But the thing is, as soon as he starts talking about Islam history, he gets everything confused. And if he then tries to place the Islam history, especially of like the 7th, 8th century, and place it into a context, he is completely lost. He knows a couple of things about the history, about the stories, the standard narrative, but nothing outside of that. So he's completely useless at whatever you give him.
Don't you just love the chats, right? Things like in the chat there that you can see on the right there. James is a hard liberal. You won't go far with him. Somebody else there. Fun fact, I've roasted and beat this kid in the chat over 3 times. All he could do in the end was throw tantrums and homonyms like a kid. And at the very bottom, this kid's voice,
James?
this guy, supposedly in his dreams, I guess. This guy's voice is so annoying. Right, nothing about let's provide a substantial response here of any sort, but let's just make up stuff and do some ad hominems because that's the best we've got. Well, at the moment,
can you zoom in a bit?
Because
for example, I can't read it. Oh, there you go. One more.
Okay.
Even better. Great stuff. Yeah.
Big.
Perfect.
Yeah. Okay.
So, on one case, right, you can have 2 men being the witness. Okay, let's take that. Put a pin in it.
No, but this
case,
verse does not say.
Wait. In the other case, the Quran says that you need a man and 2 women. So in one case,
because they hang around. They belong to 2 different social backgrounds, Islamically speaking.
Why is it? Okay, let me put it like this. Why is it that if only men are witnessing the contract, that you only need 2 of them, whereas if a mix of men and women are witnessing the contract, then you need 3 people in total, and it doesn't actually allow you to only have women as witnesses.
I answered your question already, but you're not listening.
You answered with a non sequitur, which isn't an answer. I mean, anybody can open their mouth and make, fallacious statements, but your non sequitur is not a substantial response. Yes, granted, you opened your mouth and some words popped out, but that, of course, is not sufficient. And I'm sure James, and not anybody who's paying attention here, would accept your quote-unquote answer.
The answer is men don't mix with women in Islam. They don't.
In that case.
So, but then again, all you need is the 2 women. Then you're not having any men mixing. So what's the problem? Again, it doesn't in any way explain why you need 2 women and a man. If they were not mixing, then just have 2 women, no men. Then you have got no mixing. So in fact, you're actually making the argument for 2 women on their own.
Okay.
Yes. So that's why a woman reminds a woman. And
look at the chat there. A woman cannot be alone with a man without a chaperone. That's why. Well, they could be separated by some glass. They could be separated in some other way. They don't have to be standing right next to each other. Or better yet, just don't have any men there. Then problem solved.
A man reminds a man. So in case you don't have 2 men, you have 1 man and you have 2 women so that they can remind each other. Where you don't have 2 women, you have 2 men so that the testimony can be reliable. They can remind each other, as you confirmed.
I know. Now, if anybody who's listening to this thought that response was a substantive response to James, please rewind this and just listen to that bit again. All he said was a trivial statement. Hey, 2 men can remind each other, 2 women can remind each other. That's not the point. James is specifically asking why the women need an extra man. Is he there to remind the 2 of them? Because they can't remind each other, which would infer that their memory or their ability is inferior to a man.
Where's the problem?
And
according to the Quran,
help me understand why it is that you can't simply have women being the.
There we go.
One second. Are you aware? According to the Quran, a woman's witness is exactly the same as man's.
That's exactly the opposite.
Yeah. Well, that's in contradiction to this. So again, a response would be I'll ask you the question again. Just ignore that question, right? James asked the question at the end there, which was, hey, why can't two women be witnesses on their own? And he went into a different response. Hey, do you know the Quran says this? You could either just ignore it, or you could say, well, okay, if the Quran says a woman's thing is equal to a man, then why is it that, just repeat the question, that by your standards, two women can in fact do, would you agree then actually by what you've just said, two women can then be witnesses without a man? Because that's what you are saying.
Correct.
And all he has to say yes, and then you can say, well, okay, well, hang on a moment. Which one of these are you taking? Here, the Quran says this. You're saying that, in fact, they can do it on their own. So he can't actually do it. Just repeat the question. Yeah, whichever way you do it, just repeat the question back.
And the other thing that you need to point out here is that he has just found out a contradiction, which supposedly does not exist in the Quran.
Yeah, I mean, of course, this just bypasses him, right? How do you establish that a woman's, if her testimony, and in this case, financial testimony, because that's what's being referred to, is the same as the man, then why would two women be necessary? Or in fact, why would a man be necessary at all?
Also,
what kind of witness are we talking about here? I'm talking about a financial.
Are you aware? Are you aware in the Quran we have examples where a woman's testimony carries the same weight as a man's?
Okay, so the question here, okay,
true.
even if whether it's true or not true, on this, so you can bring in that point as well, Stops. On this point then, James asked exactly the right question. Is that in relation to financial contracts? Because if it's in relation to anything else, then they can turn around and go, okay, well, it doesn't apply to financial contracts. So you need to get Adnan to commit. Either it does apply to financial contracts or it doesn't. And if it doesn't, this is irrelevant. And if it does, then it contradicts the verse.
And look at the comment, the top one. Okay, kick him. Thumbs down, thumbs down. Because he's asking a question where people can see that nobody has an answer, they want to kick him out. That's the only reaction they have. It's either violence or censorship. Never bring a real answer.
Are you aware?
Yeah, there are certain examples, sure. But
for example,
about this
do you know?
Instance.
What, do you know?
You see, what's happening now is he's shifting the burden. This is a red herring. It's now to go and test James, and does he know about other things? And you just need to, and this is where, if you know going in that this is what these guys do, and a lot of them do this, not all of them necessarily, but certainly Adnan is one, Hamza is another. When you know these guys are going to try and redirect it, you've got to stay laser focused and ignore this, right? It'll sound like to the gullible, yeah, you're not answering, but there's a good reason not to be answering these questions, because once you do, they take you off on a tangent. And all he wants to do here, and he's done this before with James, is to try and undermine his credibility so that he doesn't actually have to give an answer. All he needs to show is that James kind of sounds like he doesn't know what he's talking about, and then by their lights, they don't have to carry on it, and he's an idiot or whatever the case is. This is exactly what he did in the park when I was there live, when James brought the irrefutable inheritance error, and this guy didn't even attempt to challenge the two verses. Instead, he tried to undermine James's credibility, and that's what he's trying here.
Yeah.
Do you know?
I've heard something like that before. I don't know the details, but that seems to be getting a little off topic.
Oh no, it's not off topic.
It's
because you're making a specific point.
And you need to respond to that specific point. If you're bringing up these verses, then you need to show in the Quran that this, in fact, is in relation to the financial details. And if it isn't, then it's irrelevant.
You're making a specific point. You're making a point that here, two women are equal to one man. You're wrong. You're wrong. The verse doesn't say that. The verse doesn't say that. On top of that, to the contrary.
That's where Stops' point comes in here. What does the verse say? Can you read it, please? Bring up, or let me read it again to you. What do you think this says? Here's the part that I'm interested in. What do you think? You just said it doesn't say that. So when I read this, what do you, Adnan, understand by this?
On the contrary, we have verses in the Quran that show us that a woman's testimony is exactly the same as man's.
Now, Stops, you said this wasn't the case on something there. Do you want to just elaborate on what you were referring to?
No, I would just say, listen, okay, show me where. It doesn't exist. You can't.
Okay.
What he's doing, what he's doing is he's taking a totally different sentence, totally different context, totally different everything, where a woman says something and somebody believes it. And that is what he now says, well, if a woman can say something and somebody believes it, then her testimony is the same as that of a man. So that's all he's doing.
Yeah, so it's not related to this in any way.
No, definitely not.
And yeah, good point by you again, stops and say, okay, show me where that's the case. Because I'm not convinced, or whatever term you want to get. If you're not sure, and James said, I've heard something like that, and he may well have heard something like that. But again, if Adnan is bringing up this extra stuff, we've got to get them. It's a reminder for us, get them to show us this the case, right? Bring it up on screen. Adnan, what verse are you talking about? Can you read that out so we can establish what it is that you're claiming the verse says? Right now, because James has read out the verse, it's only fair that if Adnan is going to claim that there's some other verses that somehow show that woman's testimony is the same as a man, that he reads it out. And then, is it in context of this? Right? Which is exactly what you've pointed out.
Okay.
So what's your point?
Well,
okay.
If what you're saying is correct, then we need to ask the question why it is that the Quran says in chapter 2, verse 282, if there are not two men, then a man.
I've already answered.
James,
I've already answered.
Your answer. If you go ahead, Hamza.
Let me ask you a clarification question. Do you believe both women have to bear witness?
How's that relevant? How is that relevant? He's already agreed that, if a woman needs to remind another woman, then they're both there. And the same with men, but that's not the question. So why are you asking him that question? His specific critique is that it requires one man and two women or two men. That's his critique. Why are you asking about this? Totally irrelevant.
Seems that way to me. Let me just quickly check. So that's
come on, man. This is your argument, man.
Yeah.
You both have to testify.
Yeah. Sounds like it.
Right. So nowhere in the verse does it say that. It's just one woman.
So what's the point of having two women then? Because obviously the one woman is going to, if the one woman quote unquote forgets, the other woman's going to remind her, and she's going to do that verbally, and that will be taken as testimony.
Exactly.
So what are you talking about? Again, this is a time to get him, now Hamza, to read the verse. Read this. What is your claim, that both women are not saying this? When she's got to remind one, or when there's two women, what's the point of having two women, Hamza? What is your claim, and how do you establish it? Right? Too often these guys get away with saying statements that they never have to justify, and then the person who's coming on like James has to do all the heavy lifting. And we've got to try and avoid that wherever possible. And it's not easy because there's obviously four of them and one of him. But it's a case of every time you hear these guys make a statement that you don't agree with or you think you're skeptical of, get them to justify it. Otherwise, it sounds like they know what they're talking about and they never have to justify everything. And James has to pull up everything and his question on every single point. And when they make the statements, it all flies by as if it's a fact of the matter. And of course, it's not.
Tough. It's really tough because I've done this. I've said, no, can you show me? Can you show me? Can you show me? And they will go and sidestep this again and again and again. They will simply not answer. And the difficult part is to decide on the cutoff where you are going to give up and say, okay, you're not able to answer. You have not answered. Let us move on. But you need to establish this.
Yeah,
and I've been there, and it's very difficult to do.
Yeah, but I think what you said there is great, right? When you see they haven't, you can say, okay, so you haven't done that. I'm not going to accept that claim of yours. So we're going to move on. I'm going to suggest that claim was without evidence, and I'll dismiss it without evidence. We're now moving on. But you highlight and make it clear that they haven't established the claim that they said they have. And them saying it, or other guys saying, yes, I know that as well, that's not acceptable. Bring up the verse. Let's read it together. Otherwise, you can dismiss it. Otherwise, it's just a claim, and it's of no interest to us.
And as Adnan is saying, two women come, one testifies.
Where does it say that?
And it starts off like, bring two witnesses from among your men. So that's implying that both the men need to be witnesses. And if there are not two men available, then a man and two women from those whom you accept as witnesses. So that if one of them, i.e. the women, errs, then the other can remind her.
There you go. Right, he's just said it there himself.
Okay.
Yes. So, where does that say you both have the best testify?
Oh my word. He's just read it. Like, can you not understand your own book? They are witnesses, and if one of them doesn't, the other one will say something. What are you talking about? That's why there's two of them there. What's the other one doing there? Window dressing? It's exactly the same, and Adnan himself said it's exactly the same for the men. Right, one of them will say something, the other will correct them or help them out if they forget. It's not like they're both speaking at the same time. I mean, what? But this is, again, right, complete red herring, completely irrelevant. having Hums in here to say anything, is not going to be valuable to the conversation. And here is another prime example, right? Adnan has not addressed the point. Hums has gone off a tangent now. And unfortunately, this has sidetracked James's point now, because this isn't about this point. It's about what's the reason for having two women and one man.
I can agree with that interpretation, that perhaps the other one is a backup, but still.
Right. Let's understand one thing, as Adnan just said to you: the woman's witness is equal to the man's.
Well, in one sense, but it's still kind of implying.
So all you're questioning now is the Quran saying that a woman alone might not be fully compliant or understanding of the financial contract. And you're correct in what you say as well, James, that there are women who are intelligent, but there are also women who are not.
So why didn't the Quran make that clear? This seems to be a blanket statement for a woman. And if it's not a blanket statement for a woman, surely there would be a clarifying statement directly afterwards. That's what we would expect from a book from a divine dictator. Or at least that's what I and hopefully others would expect. Perhaps people with a lower expectation don't have that.
Yeah,
well,
there are women who get out of contract because not knowing. So she's told to have a sister to support her. What's your problem with that?
Why aren't men? Why isn't the single man on his own told to have someone in case he errs?
Well, that's what you just said already. You have already clarified that to have the testimony stronger, there are two men. Why two men is the question. Why don't you question the problem here is, why don't you question the existence of two men? Why do you assume that two women are equal to one man?
Okay, Adnan, are you just not following this point at all? No, you said in the beginning there were two men, so that one can help the other one. You agreed that there's a second woman there, so they can help one another. What's the point of having the man there to help the two women? What part of this is so difficult to follow? I mean, this is like a straightforward critique. Imagine, no wonder Adnan and Hamza couldn't even remotely attempt to deal with the inheritance error in the Quran. I mean, that requires basic fraction addition. If they can't deal with something as simple as this, don't try and bring them any sort of Rain Man stuff.
Based upon the fact that there are two women and one man.
Sorry?
I remember that, Rain Man.
By the way, that's not my saying. Hamza himself said, "Oh, you're bringing this. This is Rain Man stuff." This was basic. Yeah. This was basic fractions, by the way. We're not talking complex, theoretical physics here or tensor calculus or anything like that. Right? Straightforward, basic maths that a child in, I think, about year 3 in the UK would learn about. So, but here is a straightforward thing, and these guys seem to. I don't know whether it's willful ignorance or whether they literally just don't get the point here.
Sorry,
there's no indication of in the verse of that. There's no indication.
Sorry, Adnan. He's just retracted that. He's now agreeing two women do not equal one man. So, James, I don't ever want to hear that again. All right. Well, all you're questioning now is why does the woman need reminding?
He did not retract it. All he did is he agreed that it doesn't specifically say that both women were wearing skirts, they were both wearing earrings, and both were speaking at the same time. That's all he did.
Yeah, at no point has any of this addressed his initial critique. Let's just remember that. He came with a specific critique. Adnan has done a non sequitur. He's then told us about men and women. At no point has he said why a man needs to help two women when they can help each other and men help each other. And then he brought in this other idea that women's testimony is equal to a man, which actually refutes this verse, as we pointed out. Why would a man then be necessary? What you're saying is the man is unnecessary, but the Quran says it is. Now, if I was a Muslim, I'd be going, hang on a moment, am I going to accept Adnan's way off, long grass, just made up interpretation of this? Or am I going to follow the Quran? Right? Whether I agree with it or not is another matter. But am I going to follow the Quran or Adnan making stuff up here and contradicting this verse?
And the interesting thing is that...
Rob, sorry, just as a quick, if you look at the comments, when Muslims make claims, they have to back it up with evidence, otherwise they are false. Whilst people who disagree with Islam can make assumptions about Islam without zero evidence. I mean, that's a double negative, but with zero evidence, I think is what he's trying to say. And this is silly. All he's doing is he's quoting the Quran. You guys do not understand the Quran because you get so tied up with a man and two women in case one knows, you don't even see the problem. You are so brainwashed that you think there is a rational, logical explanation. You just say, well, there is a different story somewhere where a woman says something and everybody agrees, so that means it's okay. And this seems to, for them, in their minds, cancel the whole problem out. So for some reason, they can ignore this problem without even seeing how huge this problem is. They're just saying, well, it's not a big deal because somewhere else it says something else, and here the two women, maybe this. So in their minds, they are bringing the entire problem in a way that they are merging. I'm seeing this in front of me like two different circles, where I have one circle which is a man, and then I have two circles as women, and the size of the circle of the man is equal to the two circles of the women combined. And what they are doing is they're saying, no, the circles are not smaller, it just means that there are more circles. But they don't realize the implication of what it is that they are looking at. And then the guy underneath says, I agree, I'm pointing out this as a refutation to the guy depending on mathematics and boasting on his credential while undermining others. There's no credentials here. This is just looking at a sentence in the Quran which does not make sense, which tells the reader that the testimony of two women is equivalent to the testimony of one man. That is it. There's not more. You don't need arithmetic, mathematics, or anything. It's just a basic human thing. And they are not able to grasp it because they are able to somehow go and divert it away into some other area and then saying, well, this doesn't really apply. None of my business. No, everything is okay. Yeah, it's crazy. Sorry.
That what you're saying seems to disagree with what Muhammad says about the verse.
Oh, sorry, what does Muhammad say about the verse?
Well, what Muhammad says about the verse in Sahih al-Bukhari is that
excellent.
Is it not the evidence of two women equal to the witness of one man?
Very
and
good.
They replied in the affirmative. And he said, this is the deficiency in her intelligence.
Yeah.
So Muhammad's interpretation of the verse is that the evidence of two women is equal to the witness of one man.
Just look now, okay, now pay attention. I'm going to let it go. We'll see how long they take to respond. Notice as well, because these guys want to jump in and often interrupt, right, because they think they want to cut James off. When there's a moment like this, right, where he gets to finish, and even if it's just like a second, this second is very telling. It means the cogs are now working in all of the brains of these guys, and they're going, what the hell am I going to say now to this? And sometimes that takes, and it's just a brief moment, but if you pay attention and you do enough of these reviews and you notice these things, it's very, very rare that there's even a split second of silence. And when that is, to me at least, it's very telling, because now they have to think about, okay, shit, he's now brought Sahih Bukhari and he's told us what Muhammad has said. What the hell are we going to say now?
This is the cherry on top now. Yeah.
Right. Okay. So
okay, it wasn't long there, right? It wasn't long because I paused and I told you that. But if you wind this back, it's at least a second, and that second is just very, very telling, right? Because they're all going, "What do I say now?" Right now, the brain is turning, and it's just.
Yeah, but what is he going to come up with? I'm sure this is going to be total gibberish.
I say it regularly. I said it to Stops. I was saying it recently on Discord. I love silence. When there's silence, the brain is engaged. When they're talking, they're not thinking, right? So it's good when there's silence. And this was beautiful because there was a moment of silence there. What am I going to say now? And now let's hear what Adnan is going to attempt to respond with.
The hadith, can you read it word by word from beginning to the end?
I'd be happy to. So
yes, go ahead.
Okay, so this is a ploy.
Buying time.
Exactly right. This is to buy time for the brain to now engage. If he reads the hadith, is there something we can latch on to that we can divert away from this point? Because it may be that there's a few extra sentences. So one, it gives us time to think, and two, if we hear anything else in this hadith, we can nail in or focus in on that, and we can avoid the other part, the important part. And Muslims who are not paying attention, which is most of them, sadly, at least in the chat and so forth, will just follow along, right? They won't realize that this is going on. Let's see what happens when he reads this now.
Al-Bukhari, the book of menstrual periods, 304, Sahih al-Bukhari 304.
Okay, stop there. Yes. The title, the topic, now read. Menstrual period.
Okay,
They're going to say,
right.
well, the two women were on their period, that's why they had to have two women.
Correct. Right. There we go. So they've already found something they think they can use. Let's see how well this works. Because actually, at one point, James is going to do just something brilliant. I'm not going to tell you what. He's going to say something, and again, I'm going to prime your brains already. There'll be a moment where he'll say something. I'll let it go, and we'll see how long the silence is, and then I'll stop it afterwards. It won't be immediately now, and I think there's a little backwards and forth, but he'll suddenly say something that is just like golden. Every now and again, anybody, whether it's James, myself, stops or whatever, just something immediately pops into your mind, and you say a golden phrase, and it just like renders whatever's been said null and void. So that's going to come up. I'm already priming you for that just now. But notice what happened, right? They've now got exactly what Pops has said. They've now honed onto this is menstrual period time, and that's why this is the case. That's what they're going to try and dig into now, right?
And Shut Up has also noticed this and also latched onto this. They are going to blame the women's menses. Same thing, yes.
Correct.
So we're not alone.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was about to read. Okay, so
No. But I'm just saying.
So this hadith, go on.
So it's found in Bukhari in the book of menstrual periods.
yeah, that's right. So that's what's on the basis on
So now we have a context of what we're talking about. Go on, continue.
Well, the thing is, this hadith appears in multiple different books. So, it's the decision of the hadith collector to decide what book he bases it in. It's not like anything canonical. It's not like part of the,
Okay, so he's actually responded with a really good point here, because obviously now they're going to ignore this, right? Because he's now said, okay, well, it appears elsewhere as well, not just in this book alone. So and this is a good point for James, of course, because you could look back at this and go, okay, in future, I'm going to get that same verse from somewhere else, because this menstrual thing is going to be a red herring that they're going to go after as a justification for why two women need a man, right? But again, James has got a response that he just comes with, I think he comes up with in the moment, because it sounded like it came up with in the moment. As I was like, that is just brilliant, right? So it's coming up. But if there are other places, so if James ever watches this, or for us now, let's not use this. If you can find one where it's not in this book, so they can't use this as a like an escape route, because that's what they're looking for, some way to explain this, right? And it's like chess. You've got to close off all of those areas so that there's no escape route out of this. So that's good to know that there are other places. Are there in other books that is not the menstrual period, so that they can't use it?
The point is, don't give them too much evidence. Don't give them too much information. Don't talk so much. Don't say that this is in the book of Menzies. Just say this is the sentence. And it's in Bukhari, it's Sahih, and it's guaranteed to be authentic by Islamic scholars, and this is what it says. Don't give them information that is not absolutely necessary, because this is exactly what is going to happen.
Yeah, although they could ask what book of this in, or they could look it up, right? So it could be that he did. I don't know whether they would or not as well. But the biggest thing is that it gave them time to, right? It gave them thinking time. And in this case, it was mentioned, whether James should have mentioned it on his own or whether they picked up on it, but it's given them something to deal with now. So whatever James says now is almost to their lights irrelevant, because now all they're going to focus on is this Menzies thing. So they've already got in their mind some way to get out of this.
Yeah. Well, anyway, can I just read?
I want to underline as we go here, James. So you're saying the one who has expertise in placing hadith into categories, he chose to put this particular hadith in the category of menstrual periods, yeah?
Yeah,
yes.
But also in other categories as well.
Which categories? Why are we different category then?
Financial transactions,
just
legal contracts, lots of different places, yes.
Yeah. But it's a good thing, because like I say, it's like something for James to be even better at. He's already great. And here's a little thing, right? Yeah. If you know they're elsewhere, have those available as well, because now you've heard a response here that if you bring this up to other Muslims, you can say, it doesn't just say there, it says X, Y, and Z other places. And actually, probably, as you and I have both sort of pointed out here, stops going to somewhere else where it says it is probably a better idea up front. And if they want to say, it appears somewhere else, well, then it's irrelevant. But because this came up first, they're going to ignore everything else and hone on this. Because what a Muslim would now say, if they were intellectually honest, okay, so it appears elsewhere as well. So obviously, being about menstruation isn't the only thing that can be the case. It applies in other scenarios as well. But that's now got this point in their favor, unfortunately, and now they're going to try and run with it.
I think it's in deeds and contracts or something.
Yeah.
Like, this is one version of the hadith, but it's also Sorry?
What other category is it in?
Well, I need to get back to you on that, but I know
you must know. It says another categories.
Wait.
What, James must know everything, and you guys are utterly ignorant and don't know anything? But you see, this is again a subtle attempt to undermine James's credibility, because he's brought this hadith, and if he doesn't know the category in every other hadith where it is, then somehow that's inefficient, or that somehow undermines the argument. Of course it doesn't, but this is the sort of tactic that is used here, and it gets the Muslims who are following along, or really, when I say following along, I mean hypnotized along here, to go, wow, okay, James doesn't know what he's talking about. Of course he understands what he's talking about, but he's not claiming that he has every other hadith in every other category available. And so this is just a red herring.
I've seen this hadith about this occasion.
No, but you just made a claim. You said it's another category. So what other categories? Unless you don't know, and you just made it up.
You see how he goes after James here, but when he makes statements, he's not challenged on this, right? This is where you really need to go after him as well. Because now he's going to try and make as if James needs to know all of these other things, and if he doesn't, somehow that's a problem. It's not a problem, of course, but because he wants to make it a problem to divert away from this. Can you see what's happening here? First is the menses. Let's see what else we can find. Now it's okay. It's elsewhere. If you can't tell me where it is, somehow that's a deficiency. And all of this goes to try and undermine his credibility, not to actually challenge the claim directly.
You just made it up.
I promise you, I haven't made this up. I can't say for certain what other books it's in right now.
You're saying Bukhari put it in a different category, the same hadith.
I mean, what you could do here is, no problem, Hamza. Well, let's stop the stream now. Everybody keep silent. Can everybody be muted? I'll take 5 minutes to find the other ones. And when I do, how is that going to help you, Hamza? Oh, you've got to be an expert. Oh, really? Did I come on here claiming that I had all the other hadiths ready? What's the point of me bringing you the other hadiths? This is the one I brought you, and here's what Muhammad says about it. Do you want to deal with that, or do you want me to find all the other ones first? So we all mute up. We just pause the stream now so that we can get all the other ones. What's the point of bringing the other ones?
Because I've seen it recorded in other places. I just can't remember the names of those other places.
But you remember the name of this one. Go on, continue.
Okay.
So completely irrelevant.
It starts off, and this is Sahih al-Bukhari 304. It starts off, narrated Abu Sa'id al-Khudri, once Allah's Messenger, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, that's in brackets, went out to the Musalla to offer the prayer of Eid al-Adha, or al-Fitr prayer. Then he passed by the women and said, "O women, give alms, as I have seen that the majority of the dwellers of hellfire were you women." They asked, "Why is it so, O Allah's Messenger?" sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. He replied, "You curse frequently and are ungrateful to your husbands. I have not seen anyone more deficient in intelligence and religion than you. A cautious, sensible man could be led astray by some of you." The women asked, "O Allah's Messenger, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, what is deficient in our intelligence and religion?" He said, "Is not the evidence of two women equal to the witness of one man?" They replied in the affirmative. He said, "This is the deficiency in her intelligence. Isn't it true that women can neither pray nor fast during her menses?" The woman replied in the affirmative. He said, "This is the deficiency in her religion." And it ends there.
Okay.
Jesus,
Very good.
Lord, is almost verbatim.
Have you read any medical journals on menstruation?
Come on, please.
How is that relevant? The response to this is, how is that relevant?
Come on, please. No.
Menstrual cycle?
No.
Okay. Are you aware of what women go through during the menstrual cycles?
To some degree.
Are you married?
Sorry?
Are you married, James?
Not yet.
Well, I'm gonna give you 3 weeks. Week before, week on, week after. Get ready. Go on.
Okay.
We got
So
1 week
are you
married.
aware? I mean, let's agree on some things we know. Are women feeling normal when they are having menstrual cycles?
Often there are mood swings.
Okay. Often. Okay.
Yeah.
The ones we know, they are definitely having mood swings. Okay. So yeah.
Are there some women that don't have mood swings? That's another question you can ask here. Or do all women do this, or only some women?
No problem.
We all have the scars to show it.
So what does that constitute? What does that constitute? Mood swings.
It means being more angry than you might be normally, more sensitive than you might be normally, that sort of thing.
So
Really good response there by James as well. I mean, why he's answering these questions is another thing, right? He's allowed himself to answer these questions, and really, the onus should be on them to explain this. Here's the verse: "Don't ask me questions. Give me your response." Right? You've got to be quite firm with these sort of things. Otherwise, it looks like now there's something again that he doesn't know that somehow undermines the argument. At this moment in time, that hasn't happened. They're trying to lead to this point that, hey, women are unreliable or whatever. Does that mean their intelligence goes down at this point? And he's going to make another good point here in a few moments anyway.
So basically, you're saying they're not in a normal state of being.
Exactly.
Well, that's a vague way of putting it, but
Well,
it's
either this or that? Are they normal?
Okay, so what do you call normal? Right, in relation to what? When they're not in menstruous compared to men, what do you consider normal? See, whenever I hear statements like this, like it's just a trigger in my mind, I'm going to ask the person, what do you mean by normal? Is it not normal for a woman to have this? And if it is normal, then what's your question in relation to? This is exactly it. And if you're comparing it to a man, well, then obviously that's not a fair standard, because men have different things that they go through compared to women. So that wouldn't be a fair standard. So what the hell is normal then?
So the whole thing is off topic anyway, because we're talking about the Quran and not the Hadith. We are discussing a sentence in the Quran. This is just a backup to show that Muhammad, or whoever wrote the Hadith, understood it exactly that way. This has nothing to do with anything that we're talking about at the moment. You can just kill this off and say, look, I'm not talking about the Hadith. I'm talking about the Quran sentence. Can you explain this? Yes or no? Finished.
Yeah, to be fair though, Stops, he did bring the hadith up to show that Muhammad said this. And what they are trying to say is, hey, Muhammad said this for a reason, and the reason is because women go through menstruation, therefore they're somehow unreliable, and therefore it is correct that one man has to be there with two women. That's what they're trying to do here.
Yeah, but does the Quran say anything about when a woman is during her period, then she needs a second one?
No, of course it doesn't.
Exactly. So what are we talking about?
Well, exactly. And I think, like I say, James is going to deal with this quite nicely in a few moments, if I remember correctly.
They're not normal, but we can be a bit more precise than just saying they're not normal, I think. Like, can't we be a bit more precise about it?
James, let me just underline something again, right? You know when a woman acts crazy, and you've heard this saying when people say, is it your time of month? Have you heard that?
Yeah, I have heard that.
Right. Why do you think they say that?
Well, because it's true that often women are more sensitive and that sort of thing during this period.
No. Don't be so. Their state of mind changes. And
yes or no? Yes or no?
You accept that?
But I accept there's a change, but
don't think it's the same as they do when they're not on the menses.
No, Brother Hamza, there's a better question. There's a better question. Does it change for the better or for the worse?
How do you establish that? Because remember, it's deficient in intelligence. Does their intelligence go down when they are menstruated? And the answer is no.
In general, we could say for the worse, but still, like.
Okay, stop there.
Hold on. Can I ask something now?
Stop there. Wait.
No, I think that was kind of you've got to ask a question back. Worse in relation to what? How do you establish that it's worse? What do you mean by worse? That they can't think straight? They're emotional? What do you mean by worse?
Just stop there.
Look at the comment in the chat. Somebody called Hashim. I don't know if this is the same Hashim. How is this relevant to the verse he brought up? Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. So there's another Muslim who's
Hashim. So
who's recognizing that this is completely off topic, right? But what they, like I say, it's fairly clear what they're trying to do here, which is to show or to justify why two women need a man. But that goes against exactly what Adnan said in the very beginning, which his Muslim brothers didn't object to at all, that women's testimony is worth the same as a man. So the question here, again, a nice thing that could have been said was, but hang on a moment, Adnan, didn't you say that a woman's testimony is worth that of a man? And now are you changing your mind because I've read your hadith where Muhammad says they're deficient in intelligence? So can you make up your mind? You're flip-flopping all over the show, Adnan. Make up your mind. Are they deficient or are they not? Whichever way you go, you're either contradicting the Quran or you're contradicting Muhammad. So what are you going to do now?
Like, I feel like you're kind of, I can see where you're going, but like...
No. You don't know where we're going.
It's abundant. It's transparently clear where you go. Even a child could follow along and see where you're going with this. What do you mean, no, you don't know where we go? Of course we do. You can see it a mile away.
Okay, but, let's continue then.
Okay. So we agree that they are not in a normal state of being, right?
Well, like I said, kind of, that's a vague way of putting it. I think we can be more precise.
Well,
but
yes. Do we agree or do we not agree? Do we agree or do we not agree?
I think James kind of said a nice, good thing here in the sense of we're not very precise. I would say along the same lines, well, what does normal mean? What does that mean? That's just a general statement. To say they're normal or not normal, what does that mean? Are you saying that not normal is bad and normal is good? Really?
It's not normal. Go ahead.
Okay, we have already agreed that they're not normal, not in a normal state of being, number one. Number two, we have also agreed that they change for the worse.
No, we have not. These are allegations that you are making. This is silly. Just because you've made these things and this, I don't know. No, I don't understand this. There's a minority of women where this happens. Yes, some emotions do change in, let's say, half the women. The other half, they don't. There are different reactions to different things. You cannot generalize it. And this is totally irrelevant. The Quran doesn't mention any of this. It doesn't say if a woman is on her period, then you have to have a second one. It doesn't say that. So why are we even talking about this? Stupid.
Split hairs a little bit because quite a lot of women don't undergo mood swings when they're going.
No, we're not talking about it. We're talking about the overwhelming majority.
How do you establish that that's the case for the overwhelming majority, please? You've just made a big claim. Where is your claim that that's the case? That the overwhelming majority of women go through these mood swings? Have you got a data on that? And does that apply to all women around the world, or just some women in some places? You're just guessing. Yeah, this is your just. I'll make this up as I go along. And if it isn't, show us the data.
Understand when the Quran speaks that it's speaking to all women. It's not selecting the ones that might have and might not have.
Well, that's the whole problem, isn't it? So the people that don't have it, why should they then require a man to be there if they don't need this? You're undermining your own argument. Do you not realize this?
It's being encompassing all women because any one of them could be subjected to this.
I'm leaving your point, Brother Hamza. I'm leaving your point.
Okay, but no,
you're trying to.
Rob, just wait a second.
There is a point where
because we've got Maverick X. Dennis, it doesn't say 2 women's testimony is required, does it? That's not the point. The point is, I don't know why we need to point this out. Why are Muslims so thick, really? The point is, it says either one man, or if only one man is available, 1 man and 2 women. This is the point. And it also says, in case one woman should forget, the other one can correct her. That's what it says. And that is the point that we are making. It says very clearly that this is a misogynistic point, that a man's testimony is equivalent to that of 2 women. That is the point. Is that too difficult?
And if this is exactly what Stops has said there, then why is the man necessary? Because if the one woman is there to correct the other, what's the point of having the man there? There is no point. Unless you're saying that both of them are going to be unreliable at the same time, now you need to establish that's the case. And all she needs is one woman that's not on her period, and then the man is irrelevant anyway. So this is either superfluous or unnecessary, or, as you say, misogynistic ultimately.
Wait.
Women
there is a point in the month.
More like Islam. This is okay. This is tongue in cheek, all right, but it's nice.
Yeah,
Isn't it causes anger and irrationality? Women in menstrual are more Islamic than Islamic men. Maybe this makes the Islamic men jealous. If you think about it, it's actually so true. It's my sense of humor. Sorry.
Where women are not feeling normal, for the worse. Yes.
No, this is not the case.
There is a female. She just commented as a female. I testify.
We've got one anecdotal testimony there. Great. Well, let's just take that and run with that as the general rule of thumb, shall we? Because anecdotal evidence is always a good indication of a general trend. Yeah, this is the logic of Adnan here. Thanks, Adnan.
This is correct.
Well, okay.
So we would rather listen to a female than...
Yes, let's listen to one female because, of course, she speaks for all other females, of course. When it suits. When another female comes on and says no, then we can just dismiss her as just being an anomaly. But when there's one in our favor, well, then she can speak for everybody, can't she?
To James.
Yeah, but this is a good point for James to reset. This is what he said. Okay, whoa, guys, come on. This is going somewhere. This is silly. Let's just reset. Let's just go back to like basic position. What is it that you are claiming? He needs to turn this around because he is now against the ropes. Against something like stupid, but he is against the ropes, and he needs to turn it around and say, no, let's go back to zero.
So we agree that they change for the worse.
Okay, what's the next step?
Do men have that psychological physical, emotional disadvantage?
Well,
they have.
that's an interesting question because, on the one hand, they don't have menstrual cycles, and so they don't have mood swings caused by menstrual cycles. But in terms of other sort of moods, disadvantageous moods, like they're much more quick to anger, much more quick to violence.
We're not.
So,
Beautiful, right? A beautiful response
That's
there,
nice,
right?
yeah.
So men also have problems, right? Because he asked them, do men have problems? And James has pointed out, yes, men are quick to anger. They're much quicker to violence. And of course, violence is an emotional response as well. So it's just a different emotional response to a woman, but also an emotional response. So that's a brilliant answer.
So wait a second.
No. We're talking about a permanent. We're talking about a permanent condition.
See how he changes the goalpost? We're now talking about a permanent position, but the woman's one is a permanent position and comes and goes on a monthly basis up to a point. By the way, I'll just put a pin in that, up to a point. We'll come back to that later. See how he changes the goalpost? So when James brings up that there are men that also have emotional responses and can also be emotional, then suddenly it's, well, that just happens occasionally, but these women, this is permanent. But let's listen now.
James, we're not talking about circumstantial conditions. We're talking about permanent conditions here.
Circumstantial condition.
No, I'm saying there is something physical. There is something permanent and physical about women which men do not have. Agreed?
The period isn't permanent. Women undergo menopause.
No, I'm saying
everything.
Did you hear that? That was a beautiful comment. And they didn't stop to even acknowledge it. Right? His claim was that it's a permanent thing, i.e. that it happens every month. Right? And here you've got, our Dr. Imran there coming in with his comment there. But menopause, of course, is a time when they stop having these monthly cycles. Right? They get older, probably in their 50s or thereabouts. It's different for every woman, but then it's not permanent. Let's just hear how they respond to this. That was just off the top of his head. That was a really good response again in that moment, just to say that, right? Because they're babbling over him here.
Everything you're saying doesn't apply to
please.
Can you see the laughter there? It just didn't even register with him. It did his point, which was a knockdown against Adnan's point. If they were paying attention, they just ignored it or didn't hear it or didn't care and just laugh and giggle like two emotional men here on their own sort of monthly cycle or something.
Try not to.
Do you agree that everything you've just said about the menstrual cycle and mood swings doesn't apply to menopausal women, does it?
Listen.
Did you see there? There was that pause again. It's very short. You just got to pay attention to it. There was the pause again. What the hell do I say now? That's not necessarily the questions going on, but the cogs are working just for that split second. It doesn't apply now. The intellectually honest answer is that's correct, James. Yeah, it doesn't apply after menopause. Now you could try and say, well, he's only talking to women prior to menopause, but then you'd need some actual evidence for that. And even Adnan can't go that far. But what are we going to do now? We're going to ignore that, right? Just that little pause there is just golden.
Let's stick to the point we're making.
Let's stick to the point we're making. The point was that this is permanent for women, i.e. that it happens all the time. That was his point. James has just put a knockdown, a complete refutation of that point. Not just a rebuttal, but a refutation that that's not permanent. And his response, let's stick to the point. Well, now your point has been completely refuted. What point do you want to stick to now? See what happens here when they get refuted like this? This is just an outright refutation. This isn't like 50-50. The point has now been completely demolished. How does he respond?
James,
okay, let's stick to you know where we're going.
Yeah, but
you know where we're going. You have already made.
Do you acknowledge, Adnan, that I have refuted that point that you made that women are permanently in this state every month?
Conversation?
Questions? Can you answer one back? Does anything that you've said so far apply to post-menopausal women?
James, we're trying to have a...
There we go. He's asked a beautiful question, just as I've asked it there. It was brilliantly asked. Do you think they're going to respond?
James, we're trying to have a fruitful discussion. You've raised good points.
You've just got to stick to this point now. Do not allow them to say anything else at this point. If you don't get that question answered right now, it looks like they don't have to answer it and the point is lost. You've got to, that was just such a brilliant point and you've got to hold it on no matter what comes next, right? You've got to hold that point. And I know it's not easy to do, with Hamza just babbling in the background and Anad trying to avoid answering it. You got to just stick with that now. It's a beautiful response.
What are you doing? Just so I understand, are you saying menopausal women, they have that constant state of mind?
What? They have a constant state of what mind? What? Like they're in a menopause, like they're in a pre-menstrual, in a menstrual state? What the hell are you talking about?
Just constantly crazy? Is that what you're saying?
We didn't call anyone crazy.
Well,
we're not, yeah, exactly.
Not normal.
We're not calling anyone crazy.
We're
saying a different state of mind.
I didn't mean to use the word crazy. That was a mistake.
Use your little phrases in here.
Okay, sorry. My mistake. My mistake. I shouldn't have used the word crazy. But
I'm telling you, the state of mind changes. That's the point being made.
But I agree that that's a common thread of the menstrual cycle. That's a common effect. But if you're talking about women who have gone through the menopause and no longer have menstrual cycles, then that's not a factor.
You've got to stick on that. That's such a good point. Look at Adnan trying to wave it away. The other thing to pay attention, it's not easy, and we can do it here in slow motion. This is for the viewers, this is for all of us, is the hand signals, the body language, right? That hand signal of waving is let's get past this, right? It's an unconscious signal of let's not deal with this. The hand goes there to wave, to deflect, to distract, right? That movement is a distracting movement. Right, I don't know what to do now. And the hand it's almost like automatic, right? Adnan doesn't actually know in a sense that he's doing this, but it's just a distraction technique that the body is doing now as a defense mechanism, right? That's what's going on here for Adnan. And of course, Hamza's defense mechanism, I'll just babble over this nonstop. I'll just make some irrelevant point and I'll make it loudly and repeatedly, and hopefully I'll drown out the response by the interlocutor.
Not listening.
Listen,
problem.
James, we have already agreed and we are having a fruitful discussion. We have agreed women are not going through normality.
Not acknowledging his point at all, right? He's now gone back to people are not going through normality pre-menopause.
Every month for some time, we have agreed, right? We've also agreed, you have already agreed with us, you cannot backtrack on that they change for the worse. Yes?
Yeah, but broadly, we can say
that. Okay. So women every month, unlike men, have this state of mind, this state of being, this state of emotion,
and
consistently.
And so what?
Throughout their...
Yeah, and so what? Until what point? Do they do that forever, Adnan? Or they only do that to a certain point, Adnan? What happens after menopause, Adnan? I'm going to press you on that point because you seem to want to ignore that, and that is a refutation of this particular point that you want to make, which of course isn't relevant originally to the argument, unless you're saying the argument is if they're emotional, then there needs to be a man there. But as James has pointed out, if men are emotional, should they not have a woman there to ensure that if they try to remind each other and they can't do it, then there's a woman there when she's not on her menstrual cycles, or when she's in menopause, then she can help the men out. Of course, you're not going to say that, because that would be actually consistent and equal.
Throughout their life until they stop menstruating. Yes or no?
Yes, but
okay.
Wait.
You see, this is the problem with Adnan, right? You've got to deal with him slightly differently. James is the butts are getting drowned out here by Adnan, and that you can't allow, right? This isn't a fruitful and intellectually honest discussion. This is let's steamroll over James, right, and ignore his points and try and push my point to the exclusion of the points that's being made against me loudly and repeatedly. So hopefully the gullible and ignorant Muslims won't remember what was being said. And so you have to play a different game with somebody like this.
Wait, you haven't listened to the whole answer.
No, wait. We are moving.
More than just one word answers. Is that okay?
No, it's not, James. What are you doing? You've accepted.
No, it's not. No, it's not. So we will make you answer the way we want. We'll give long answers. We'll ignore your responses, and we'll do it our way because, of course, we're not interested in intellectually honest discussion. This is propaganda for our guys to show that we're, quote unquote, dealing with everybody. How do we deal with them? We steamroll them. We don't allow them to give an adequate response. And then we pat ourselves on the back that we've done a good job.
Have you accepted that women's state of mind once a man changes for the worse? Do you accept that?
Yes, but the thing is,
can you see here? They won't allow this response. I'm sorry, I'm stopping every 5 seconds and repeating myself, but they won't allow him to explain himself so that the Muslims can hear this, right? They're only allowing the part that they want so they can get to their narrative and bugger anything else that's being said here that might be a counter to that. They just steamroll over this. This is intellectual dishonesty at its highest level. I hope people who are watching can acknowledge this, even if you're a Muslim, But this doesn't mean Islam is false. It just means you need to pay attention to people like this, and you should be very cautious. And there are a few Muslims that we are seeing now more regularly paying attention to this sort of, dishonest tactics here. This is not intellectually honest conversation.
No.
Wait. Hamza, is this a conversation or what? What's going on here?
No, it's not but about that.
Are you the only people allowed to give more than one word answers?
No, what we're going to do, we're going to underline everything you say, because we know how you operate. Okay, so I'll say it again to you. You accept that a woman's state of mind changes for the worst once a month. You accept that, yes? Everybody's seen it.
Her life often.
You accept that, yes?
Sure, often.
Right.
Right, and do you accept that that stops at menopause and then that no longer applies? And then the point that you were trying to make that this applies to all women is refuted. Do you accept that? Are we going to underline that too?
Right. So once a month, okay, so we're in agreement now.
Can I add something else, though?
We're in agreement now. Once a month, a woman's state of mind changes detrimentally for the worse. Yes?
On average.
Rob, just pause here for a second.
Yeah.
What I want to point out, this is what they love doing. They love to say, okay, we are now in agreement, as though you have established a common point and we have now got you over to agree to what we are saying. And now we are going to go even further and show you that whatever we are going to say now is also going to bring you across there. You have to agree with us. So this is just tactics.
Yeah, exactly. That's what they think, right? But of course, that's not true. And of course, if James was able to finish, he'd refute this. But because this is the second time he's repeated, and the second time he's asked James now if he agrees, right? So this is trying to underline it clearly and loudly for the gullible audience, and for James to say, yes, I agree with this small point. But because he's not able to give the rebuttal to actually show that even if he agreed with this, he's still refuted the point, right? That part's not coming out. I don't remember if he actually does get to make that point now, right? So second time this has happened.
However,
go on, you can say it loud, say it loud.
I said,
okay, well, if you stop talking, then maybe he can do that. Keep quiet and just listen to the answer. Let's see now whether he's able to get it out in its entirety.
On average,
James here has conceded there's a problem with women's state of mind once a month due to her menses. Therefore,
no, he has not.
Continue.
Can I say?
Yeah, don't ask, can I say, James, at this point. Here, you've just got to steamroll them. You were getting steamrolled here as much as you might not like to hear it. Obviously, we're on your side of the fence here. But he was attempting to steamroll you. At this point, there was a moment of pause here. Don't ask permission. Here, you just take control. It's your moment to do that now. And you say it, right? He said to you, say it loud and proud, and you didn't get a chance to. Now, whether he was referring to you agreeing with them or whether he's referring to you actually making your point was a little bit unclear to me there. I mean, other people can rewind and listen, but you've got an opportunity here. You just need to go at it, right? And press the point to get that same sort of agreement from them. No, we're not going to carry on. And you press the menopause point and do not stop until you get agreement. You do exactly what Hamza's done. Now you do it to them.
Can I say something now? Because there's two problems with where you're going here. Kind of problem number one.
Where are we going?
You don't know where we're going.
Well,
you
don't
know where we're going.
Let me say something. I know. Basically,
Yes.
I can identify two problems here. Number one is that kind of even if we concede that we should concede that on average women have mood swings during their menses. However, that isn't reason to believe that their memories are kind of twice as deficient, which is what Muhammad said, like that they're deficient in their intelligence.
Notice how they interrupt again incessantly, right? He cannot get out a point long enough to actually respond with an actual point so they hear the entire point. Because again, remember, these guys are not here to hear the entire point. If they can kind of get a gist of where they think it's going, they're going to interrupt immediately so that the audience doesn't get to hear the full point. And so it sounds like they know what's coming next and they're just going to respond, right? So he's not finished making the point yet, but he's getting interrupted here.
I'm not allowing that.
I'm not allowing that. Did you hear that? I'm not allowing that. There you go. That should say everything about this channel if you ever thought that there was any chance of it being a fair discussion here.
None of this. Wait, why are you interrupting me?
Listen to the words. State of mind. They don't think straight.
Okay, but what does that have to do with intelligence? Because Muhammad said that they're deficient in intelligence. And,
you said they changed for the worse. You said they changed for the worse.
No, you said that, and you tried to force him to agree with you. He's now asking you a legitimate question. How does that affect their intelligence? Are you going to respond to that, or are you just going to keep babbling on and repeating yourself with a claim that you brought and tried to force him to agree with?
Not us. You said. You agreed.
Oh, as if he just made this up himself. You were the one who pressed this point and kept, and your guard dog there had to jump in as well and try and press the point multiple times. And now you make it as if it's James's point that he brought up. He was bamboozled and not bamboozled, I apologize, James. He was steamrolled into agreeing with you. And now he said, well, okay, there is that point. But he's brought up some responses to this, and you guys are just ignoring this as always.
Well,
Well,
yeah,
I proposed an idea. You agreed. They changed for the worse.
but
Because this is what you have.
this isn't helping justify what Mohammed said when he said that women are deficient in intelligence.
We're not justifying anything. We're just going somewhere with this argument, and you're not letting us do that.
No, you're not letting him respond. He knows where you're going. It's transparent where you're going with this, and you're not allowing him to respond to actually potentially prevent you from going where you want. You're going to go there regardless of what he says anyway, but at least he can be on the record. That's the most important part.
Okay, fine. Please continue then.
Okay.
See, he had 2 points he wanted to bring up. He's now said half of one. They've steamrolled over him, and now they're continuing on, right? So nobody gets to hear the 2 points that James was going to make there. He made one of them sort of halfway or 3/4 of the way, but never got to say the other thing.
Okay. So we agree that women have a different state of mind.
Here's the other tactic. We just keep repeating the same thing, right? We're not going to engage with what you said. We'll just keep repeating this and just say, do you agree? Do you agree? Because to the gullible, hypnotized audience, it now sounds like James is on their side. Of course, James is nowhere near that. But if you're not paying attention and you just love these guys and your mind is just wandering all over the show, which most of them are, it now sounds like he's agreeing with them.
Due to the physiology or their natural sense of being, they have a different state of mind once a month, and we also agreed that they change for the worse. Yes.
Yeah, broadly speaking.
And men generally don't have that disadvantage.
It's a pity he said yes. It's such a
brothers,
pity.
please, can you stop? If you're Muslim, stop trying to join the studio. I'm trying to get Hashim back in, and you're filling up the studio. Okay, please stop jumping in. I'm going to keep kicking you. All right.
I'm finding it funny because I'm just thinking James has admitted to a whole bunch of things that he's realizing might get him in trouble later on.
No, Sadat. He hasn't even finished. He's brought up rebuttals to this, which you guys haven't allowed. So smiling and laughing as if you've had a significant response here is just like, are you also as hypnotized as the rest of the audience?
When the women in his life, respectfully, when they watch or listen to this. But I mean, it's not about being politically correct, right? It's about being correct. We're just speaking from our experiences, what we know.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And this exercise we're doing right now is not to demean or to degrade women or to disrespect them. This is stating facts.
No, the
This is
Quran
stating
does that.
medical.
What's that, Stops?
I said the Quran does that. You don't need to do it.
Yeah.
Physical, facts we all know. So next point. Now, having established these points, the next point is, do men have these disadvantages, generally speaking?
What did he like? Why are you repeating this? Did you not hear his first response? Is it like he's got the memory of a goldfish, or is it in one ear and out the other, or is it just a complete disregard for anything? Is it like Adnan might as well be speaking to himself and hearing his own echo? Has James not responded to this? I ask you with tears in my eyes, if you're a viewer to this, has James not said that men also have emotional issues, which are different to women? And now he asks the question
again. Even if he doesn't, if he says no, men don't, women do. Now what? What are they going to get from there? It doesn't make sense what they're doing. I know where they're going and where they're trying to go, but it does not make sense at the end of the day. He should just let them play it out and then do what? It doesn't work.
But he's answering the questions and they're in control. As long as you're asking the questions, you're in control, right? Because they don't have to justify anything, right? They're just going to try and lead where they think they can go, and they're going to override when he wants to have responses that can legitimately stop them going where they want to go, because they're going to go there no matter what. That's how they operate, right? And if you bring a substantial response, they're going to sidetrack it, ignore it, steamroll over it, and they're going to go to where they want and then hold their hands up and say, look, we responded, we refuted this. At no point did they actually do this, and at no point did they actually listen with any sort of intellectual honesty to the responses. And they've totally ignored by now the menopause thing. Totally ignored that, right? And that was a response that knocks this out of the park for women over that age. And at no point does it say that anywhere in the Quran anyway. So James has just brought up such a beautiful point, and it's now been totally ignored.
They don't have the disadvantage of mood swings due to menstrual cycles. However, they might have other disadvantages.
Okay, so here again, right? Just a thing for James. I would suggest at this point, don't bring up the woman, right? You've got very limited time to speak. And as long as you say something, he's giving you like a few seconds here to speak. Don't speak about the women. Go straight to the men and say, but men also have them, because he asked about the men. Right? Just ignore the question as it was phrased and answer the question you want, because that's what they're doing. And ultimately, the point you want to make here is that men have their own version of some emotionality,
No,
which we
Rob,
do, especially
Rob, no. Don't, no, don't do it. No, because now you are the one making a claim. You have to turn it around. You have to tell them, are you telling me that men don't?
You could do it that way as well. Now, that's another way you could also do it. And but the only concern I have with that, Stops, is then he will say yes, right? Then you have to bring up something about it, because if you don't, then it looks to the audience like that it's only women, men are great, and so it's now justified that two women do actually need this man. So you could do it that way, but then you've got to be ready for if he says no, men don't have that problem, and then you have to jump in and say, well, yes, there is. Here's this. Do you acknowledge they have X, Y, and Z? So yeah, you could, in the hopes that they do respond that way. But if we're going to go down the men route, then, and if there are concerns as James has brought up, then you've got to get those out into the open and not allow it to be the case that men, quote unquote, come across as though they don't have any problems.
Yeah, otherwise they're going to say, well, prove it.
Well, then you can do the same as them. Oh, but I know all the men. I know lots of guys that want to fight and get emotional, don't you? So you could just do the same anecdotal evidence that they did, because they appealed. They had one woman up there, right, and as if she spoke for everybody. And you can highlight that. Hey, you had one woman up there. I'm one guy. I've had that happen. Haven't you guys ever had that emotional thing? So there we go. I've now responded. Just like you guys did. You used anecdotal evidence, so have I. What's the problem? When you bring me a study, I'll bring you one. Until that time, you used anecdotal evidence, and so have I. So you can't critique me for that, because it's exactly what you did. You'd be a hypocrite.
James, do you want to come on the panel? Do you want to comment on this as well? Yeah.
Yeah, he's welcome to jump on here as well.
Just check the link in there. James, if you want to jump on, then join us. If you just want to listen in, that's also cool.
Yeah, I'll post a link, because I'm not watching the chat. So Stops, if you can add him in, because I'm only looking at the actual recording. Yeah. All right, let's carry on.
James,
wait.
Step by step.
Just as
we're moving step by step. We're moving step by step.
No, but this is on your step. This is the same step. The step you're saying is that
James,
this is
Can you see how they just attempt to steamroll him? He's doing his best here to actually stop here to make a point. They just want to steamroll him. This is not about having let me just repeat this. It's not about having an intellectually honest conversation. Right? They're on their way to a point that they think is going to attempt to refute James. They're not going to let anything get in the way, least of all an honest response that they have to deal with from James. So at this point, Hamza and Adnan are doing a tag team here of let's steamroll and let's just get to the end point eventually by asking you a number of questions and ignoring anything that might stop us getting there.
And welcome, James, on the panel. Now we're going to have a really tough time knowing when you are going to talk or when you are going to talk. Which of the yous is going
James,
to talk?
Good evening. Welcome, man.
Yeah, good evening, guys.
Just looking back at this, mate. Go on. Yeah, I don't know how much you've heard of this, but just listening back to this now, the intellectual dishonesty here is just mind-boggling. It's just these guys are steamrolling or attempting to steamroll you here to get to a point. No matter what you say, they've got a way they're going to get there. So you just say stop, maybe multiple times if you want to say something, because I'm running it, but I can't see you because I'm on the other screen at the moment. Because obviously you are speaking on the video, but you're also going to speak live. So just shout stop a few times, and then I'll know that it's the live view and not the recorded view.
Gotcha.
But if you want to say anything, at regards to this point, because you have a memory of this, I don't know how much you've listened to, but if you want to bring that in, then do that.
Yeah, I'll just say like one thing right now. Like at this point in the conversation, like it partly seems to me that their initial attempt to I kind of made a point basically kind of like, well, look, this Quran verse is saying that female testimony is less reliable, and at first they try to defend that and say or refute that claim and say, where does it say it's less reliable? Like kind of you need two men, don't you? And it says you need two women, or it's just like really convoluted and silly. And so kind of like after going through that a couple of times, where they both kind of try to make it really clear, like, no, that this Quran doesn't say that women are less reliable. What they then kind of, I said, well, you trust how Muhammad interprets the verse, right? And they're like, yes. So I had to so I showed them the hadith where literally Muhammad says, oh, the proof that women are deficient in intellect is this verse. And so then they had to try and like actually, revert back and say, kind of like, they just like brushed over the fact that they were denying that until then. And then they started to say, well, okay, it's justified to say that women are less reliable. And basically their claim is because they have periods. And so, but like, obviously that's not a very good claim to make. It's kind of like they're on dodgy ground there. And so part of their strategy, I think, like rhetorical strategy, is just to slow down the conversation and just like make it very stodgy, like spend a lot of time talking about like redundant, silly things like, oh, is it true that women they're not normal during their time of the month? Like, because the more time they spend kind of talking about other things, kind of the more they're able to sort of get away from it in a bit, and like so there's less impact of how silly this verse is and how silly kind of the Islamic teaching is and how misogynistic it is. So I think that's part of their rhetoric at the moment. They're kind of trying to sort of, if they make it like question and answer, and I'm only allowed to say kind of like single word questions, I'm not able to kind of like hammer any points home about how these teachings are misogynistic and so on, then like the audience, I know somehow it's like kind of a layer of padding between the audience and the truth, or it helps them maintain the cognitive dissonance and like not let it hit home properly. I think that's what they're kind of trying to do.
Yeah,
exactly.
Definitely.
Rob, just hang on. I tried to remove the link from the chat, but I can't. You'll have to do that yourself.
Okay, I can't even see the link at the moment, so I'm not sure where it is. I'm just looking now to see if I could. Maybe it is already gone. I don't know, but I can't see it now. All right, let's carry on. Yeah, so I think, you're right. So James, have you got now, just for your own interest, have you got the other locations of where this hadith is mentioned in other books of the Sahih?
If anyone who wants to find what other books it's in, you go onto sunnah.com, you search women deficient intelligence. I'll do that right now if you like. But
yeah, have a look, because one of the things I was thinking is, because you did mention it, and obviously it is elsewhere, is to bring it up in future. If you ever brought this again to other Muslims, not these guys necessarily, because now at the end of this they're going to think that they've refuted you when they haven't even remotely done so. But what might be useful is if it's in somewhere else, right? Because the moment they heard that this was menstrual cycles, they had to get out of jail, right? When it came to the hadith, he asked you, read the hadith, right? And Stops and I pointed out that time, this was thinking time for them, because it was a beautiful moment where you had read this hadith and there was this second of silence. And I'm very tuned to this, right? It's very rare that there's a moment of like even a millisecond of silence, right? They're often interrupting you incessantly and so on. So when there's a moment of silence, it's like the cogs are working for all of them, because there's 4 of them there, right? Somebody's going to come up with something. That's why there's got 4 against 1. But there was that moment where you read the hadith, right? And then Adnan came up and said to you, can you read it out, right? So that was immediately thinking time. And then somehow it came up that it was part of the menstrual book. And for them, that was already their way out. That's why they went down this route. So that's why I was asking if you can find it elsewhere, because it won't allow them to try and bring up this as an excuse, right? That allowed them like what they thought was a get out of jail card on this one.
Yeah, I've just posted one of the alternate places this is recorded. So like in Bukhari, it's also in the book of charity tax, basically.
Yeah. That's a great one, right? So that's a good thing for you and I and everybody else listening. If this were to come up again, then it would be a case of going to that book instead of this one about menstruation, right? Because this just gave them an excuse to go off on this line. They still haven't established that this is a problem, and they still haven't allowed you to fully articulate that men have different problems, which you did do the first time, but it's like Adnan has never heard you and just ask the question again as if he's never heard it, and they've never let you give that second point, right? So you had 2 points, you gave sort of 3/4 of one, and they interrupted you. You never got to the second one either. So this is the sort of steamrolling effect that's going on. He wants to get to this point so that he can justify why, in fact, it's okay for 2 women to have a man there. But then on the other hand, as he pointed out, he said in the beginning that the Quran says that a woman's testimony is equal to a man. So make up your mind, right? He's all over the show, of course. So he's gone down this route only to contradict his original statement.
James, we will do it quicker. We'll do it quicker. Believe me. right?
Well, okay, like I'm putting a flag up here because there's something that might be glossed over, which is important.
No, nothing will be glossed over. You will speak your mind. You will say.
Yeah, when is he actually going to speak his mind? Because at the moment you are incessantly talking nonstop and interrupting him incessantly. So exactly when is he going to speak his mind? When you've kicked him off? Like, is he allowed to do it here with us instead? Because you guys don't give him a chance? This is just ridiculous.
You have to say. I'm just trying to demonstrate to everyone that there is something people miss in this discussion, and this is exactly what we're talking about. So men, in that sense, men have more normal sense of being than women do, generally speaking, proportionally speaking, looking at lifespans. True?
In terms of not being affected by menstrual cycles, yes.
Yes, you know exactly what we're talking about, James. What's the point of keep repeating it? You know what we are talking about menstrual cycles and what they cause, right?
Sure.
Men don't have that, right?
Sure, yes.
So men, if we were to calculate, let's say, lives of men and women, generally speaking, right? Men, in that sense, if they lived equal lives, if they lived equally long lives, men would be in a state of normality more so than women. You agree?
Well, I mean, that depends. Like, if
good response, right? This is a good one from James here. It depends whether that's the case. How could you establish that? He wants to say that, but where's the evidence that that's the case? And many men are quite violent and emotional and so forth. And does that mean that if we're using the same standard, they're as bad as women and they require 2 women? This is the point to drive home, right?
And if this were the case, how does that in any way impact the sentence in the Quran?
Yeah, well, we can ask him to get to that, right? Because he's still trying to get there. I think we all know where he's going. James knows where he's going. Everybody goes, and then he goes, no, you don't know where we're going. Of course, everybody knows where he's going with this. This is to try and justify why 2 women need to have a man there, even though one can remind the other. So what the hell's the point of the woman being there? Sorry, what's the point of the man being there? And what happens if he's a guy that's just had a fight and he's emotional? Right? Let's not even think about that.
By normal, wait. If by normal, yeah, we mean something along the lines of level-headed and calm, let's say, not sensitive, well then that's harder to measure, because even though men don't suffer from menstrual cycle mood swings, men do suffer from greater levels of aggression and anger and rage. And these are all things, by the way.
Look at his response, right? Look at Adnan's response. This is a superbly good point but again, I say to you, look at the body language, right? It's very difficult. James can't do this in the moment, but we can do it when we slow it down, right? The shake of the head, like, oh shit. Right? It's like he's not happy with us because this is actually a point against his position. He wanted to make the point that men are in this way superior to women. He doesn't want to use that language, but that's what he wants to say. And when James brings up this point, right, it's the shake of the head there, right? This sort of thing, because he knows there's a point coming in, he doesn't know what to do with it. So there's involuntary shake of the head there. Oh, fuck.
Which
we are not talking about. We're not talking about.
So let's all interrupt him.
I need to make an important point.
James, are you trying to imply that men are easier to enrage than women?
Yes, they can be. And they have a different thing to women. That's what he said, right? What the hell is the problem with you? Like, you are not listening. Jesus.
That's often the case.
That's
Listen. My point is that while we can point to the fact that women have this period of the month where they have more mood swings and they're more sensitive than normal.
Okay.
If we let me finish the point. We only need to look at the prisons and see the fact that men are responsible for like 90% of the violent crime to see that men have, as a background level, a higher level of certain types of irrational behavior than women do. So for you to, we can't just very quickly and hastily say, oh, women, because of their menstrual cycles, spend less of their time in a
beautiful, right? That was well done, James. Did you have that already available, or did that just come to you in the moment?
Well, yes. I think I've talked about this with Muslims before, okay. And one of the defenses they've tried to bring up is, like, oh, women have menstrual cycles, and so it makes sense to kind of consider their testimony half as reliable. But like, if you think about what happens during a menstrual cycle, you're more sensitive. But like, if you say women are more sensitive, like maybe in certain ways, but then men are much more sensitive, like in terms of other ways, like you know, if it comes to like, you know, getting so sensitive that you're willing to kind of punch someone in the face or like bottle someone or that sort of thing, you know, it's men who kind of so you can't, it's not an easy comparison, or you can't just like leave out that part of the equation and just say, and just
yeah,
like,
no, I think that's brilliant, right?
ending
It's going to emotion, right? Women have a certain emotion, but men have another one. And as you quite rightly pointed out, they make up the vast majority of inmates in prison. Why? Because oftentimes it's violent crime that's involved, and women do far less of that. And so men are much quicker to anger, which is an emotional response. And if the claim that Adnan is making is that, hey, women are in some way, quote, he's not saying the words, he doesn't want to use those words, and that's why he's being very careful not to say it. But if they're deficient in intelligence, which is what Muhammad actually says, he should be agreeing with that. And if they are, and it's because they're emotional, then your argument stands as well. That when men, because otherwise, what's the argument against this? Because if men are emotional and they're not deficient, how does he establish that it's only women that can be deficient when they're emotional? So he has to accept that if men are emotional in the sense of being angry or aggressive, that will also affect their quote unquote intelligence. I think that point is brilliant. But I don't think these guys are going to accept this. I can't remember what they say now, but we'll see what happens now.
Rational states than men.
Also, just because we have more black men in prison in the U.S.
What the hell is this on? Just because we have more black men. Look at that. Look at the devious way that he sidetracks this, right? You said nothing about black men. You just talked about men in prison. So look how he's now going off on a red herring to talk about black men now. Right? Completely off the point. Let's see where this goes now. I remember this bit.
Yes. You're now arguing that black men are more aggressive, they are more violent, they are more criminal?
No.
Is that what
men are more aggressive and they are more violent because of testosterone. And we know that.
Are you arguing just because are you arguing just because there are more black men in prison?
Did he ever say that? Is anybody who's watching this, did anybody hear James say this? This is intellectual dishonesty of the worst kind. This is why this guy is actually now, in comparison to Hamza, he's probably worse than Hamza. At no point did James ever say that. He just said men. Now he wants to make it painted as if, do you know what's happening now? Do we all know? He's going to try and paint James as a racist. When James said nothing of the sort. The intellectual dishonesty of this low-life scumbag. It's rare that I get to have to say this on a stream like this. This scumbag who wants to go down this route, I hope everybody who's listening to this takes the scumbag for the scumbag he is now in an attempt to go off on this tangent. At no point was this being said. This dishonest charlatan.
And this is why you need to turn it around. You need to immediately say to him, okay, Adnan, are you now making a racist comment? Are you singling out blacks to do anything? You immediately need to turn it around.
Yeah, that's brilliant, actually.
I mean, that's one route to go, but like, I think they could very easily kind of almost use that as an excuse to terminate the conversation and say, oh, if you're just going to make it personal, then like get out of here, or that sort of thing. Like,
yeah, that could also happen.
You're always like, you're kind of, since you're at a sort of disadvantage here, since they have the mute button, they have the kick button, kind of, you can't, there's always like a risk in some ways. So I was being kind of more conservative and like defensive than I would, if it was in real life at the park or that sort of thing. But
that's why we need to deal. James, you and I should deal with this Adnan and Hamza on modern day debates or something like that, right? Where they don't have this ability, and we can just go at it in the same way they do. Because you are right, you're walking a little bit on eggshells here, because they can turn it around even more dishonestly than he's tried to do this, and give it an excuse as to why they kick you off. They're looking for an excuse to kick you off, and you did well to stay on. I think it's 47 minutes in total. It's probably a record. For somebody that is as bad as Hamza claimed you were before you even started. He poisoned the well before you even got on the stream. So we made note of that as well. But that is a good point. But this dishonesty and the way this guy is behaving now is just absolutely shameful. But again, would any Muslim see this? Look at this here. This should be this at the moment should be referring to Adnan, of course. But because this guy is likely completely hypnotized, this is very likely pointing to James. And this is the sort of level that unfortunately some of these Muslims are. But these are the ones that are attracted to this. It's like moths attracted to a flame, right? A flame that's going to burn them eventually.
They are more violent and criminal than white men? Is that what you argue?
There are other reasons for that, but we know what the reasons are that men in general commit more violent crime. The reasons are due to their higher levels of aggression. And we know this from psychology.
No, but what you've done, you see, you presented a case and then you just give exceptions when another standard was applied. Same standard.
What the hell are you talking about? Are you, as usual, Hamza's not following this. As soon as Hamza opens his mouth, we've seen this time and again. We've done like, I don't know, 20 reviews by now. As soon as Hamza opens his mouth, you're virtually guaranteed that he's not following the point. He's going to come up with some inane comment that's going to take you off track. It's like reliable. It's like clockwork.
Same standard.
No, I gave more explanation.
So why are you not giving an explanation for why there's more men? Why is there more men in prison then? Tell me that.
Yeah,
He's explained it to you. Well, you're not paying attention. They're more aggressive. There's more testosterone. They're quicker to violence. Like, what part of this are you not? It's like, I don't know, James. It's like you've got the patience, as you said here. When you do it on a review like this and you watch it, and because you've already said this multiple times, and this guy asks you a third time as if, he's not heard it. He's been like hypnotized and doing something else while you were talking, and he asks it like as if it's the first time. It's unbelievable.
Well, let me say something kind of to be a little bit generous here. So like probably I think what they heard was kind of, I made the claim that like men, if you're going to say that men are kind of like spend more time in a normal state of mind or a rational, calm state of mind than women, then I bring up the fact that men commit more violent crime, and as part of that I kind of said, just look how much how men are in prison more for violent crime. And so they probably try to think of that. They probably try to think, okay, so he's saying that purely because men are in prison more for violent crime, therefore men are more violent in general, and that's the only reason. And so we can extend what James has just said and apply that to black people, and then we can say that we can imply that James's reasoning here kind of necessarily kind of implies kind of racist claims as well. And so kind of that's what they're thinking. That's because they think that that's kind of like the form of my argument. However, I was just bringing up the kind of the fact that men are in prison more for violent crime as an illustration of the fact that men have certain types of aggression more than women. I mean, we know why men have more types of aggression than women, and it's not just because they're in prison more. It's also because we've there's been psychological experiments done, and various tests. It's like well studied as a phenomenon.
Yeah.
So they've latched onto this kind of one point about the prison rates, and they think that they can just take that and then like try and kind of put it in a kind of simplified kind of racial context. And so I just break it down for them and say, no, there's different reasons for these two different questions, and then when I kind of point this out in clear terms, they have to just drop it and they kind of brush it aside. Like every time they've kind of tried to make a point against me and I've like diffused it, they just kind of ignore it. They don't like kind of admit that like their point was like garbage or shit. They just like try and bring up something else. It's funny. We'll
exactly.
See in a second. Yeah,
this is steamrolling, right? And if you make a point against them, they ignore it. They never concede it, and they move on as if you've never said anything, right? This is utter intellectual dishonesty from this lot. These propagandists.
Part of the reason is, like a big part of the reason, is because men are more aggressive because they have more.
Why is there more black men in America then?
Well, with black men, it's because, in particular, kind of black people. One of the big reasons is because black people live in poorer neighborhoods and are exposed to kind of certain upbringings that make it more likely for them to commit crime because of their deprived upbringing. But so there are different reasons in different circumstances. But we do know from psychology. We know from psychology that men are more aggressive, and it's because of testosterone, among other things.
Look. Your argument simply doesn't make sense, and it's ill-informed.
Okay, so the one thing we could say here at this point is when you hear something like this, is like to say to Adnan, right? It's not easy, and we're doing this afterwards because we can slow it down and break down. Hey, Adnan, what's my argument? He said he's obviously disagreeing with your argument. I really do not think that he knows what your argument is. Like, what is my argument?
The reason why there are more black.
Sorry, was you? I don't know if that was you now live or you recorded. I guess it's you recorded.
And the reason why there are more black men in prison in the U.S. is because the system is institutionally racist. That's one point you failed to mention for some reason. Let's move on. Let's come back to our point,
okay,
right?
Let's come back to our point. So this was an entire, by his own standards, this was an entire diversion. He said it himself. Thank you, Adnan, for admitting your dishonesty.
James, this is something that you could use. You could just say, okay, Adnan, thank you for that, but what point have you just made?
Yeah, he himself says it. Let's get back to our point, right? So this was a complete red herring in an attempt, as James pointed out, to try and paint James as being racist when there was no such thing. He was pointing out men and why they're in prison more than women, as a point against women because they have testosterone, etc. Right? Simple and easy for anybody who's paying attention, who wants to take James honestly and charitably. This geezer doesn't want to do any of that, and then admits that he was off on a tangent himself anyway.
That's the reason why there are more black men.
Are men more aggressive due to their biology than women?
That's got nothing to do with the point we're talking about.
Well,
nothing.
See how they don't answer the question, right? Straightforward question. When James is asked the question, they press him to answer the question. And did you remember, I don't know if you were at that stage, Hamza asked you the same question about the biology of women when they're menstruating multiple times to, quote, underline it. When you ask a straightforward question, they dodge it completely. Openly. It's not as if they're dodging. He just said that's got nothing to do with it and just moves on. Right? This is the intellectual dishonesty. And we can slow it down here and show everybody what's going on. Not easy to pick up in the moment, right? Because it's going so fast, and you've got people talking left, right.
So they can instantly see that. Wait a second. So they can instantly tell that, like, as soon as they can see that, then I can say, well, this is one reason why we might consider the testimony of men to be not reliable if they're hot-headed, and they're women are unreliable because they're emotional. But if you admit that men are more hot-headed than women, then suddenly you have their whole justification for this verse can now be turned against them. This line of reasoning about gender specific kind of emotional behavior. So they instantly kind of like don't want that. So they're kind of like trying to sort of make it only about women being having menstrual mood swings.
Otherwise it falls apart.
Exactly. That's the whole point here, right? To try and demonstrate that there is a reason why two women need a man, right? First of all, like we said in the very beginning, he said that women's testimony is the same as a man. Then he was of the view, and you pointed out, and Muhammad said, well, one needs to be there to remind the other. So unless they're both in the menstrual cycle at the same time, in which case maybe they shouldn't be there at all, that would be the only reason to have a man. But if one woman is there to remind the other, presumably one isn't in the menstrual cycle, and therefore the man is irrelevant. And if the men are there and they've just had a fight, well, then they're going to be in an emotional state. And presumably, if they were being consistent, they'd have a woman that's either in menopause or is not in a menstrual cycle in case they make a mistake. That would be the intellectually honest position. But of course, they're not going to go that route because they have to defend the Quran. Poorly, as it happens.
Challenging.
We are discussing specifically the mental sense of mental normality. We are discussing specifically that. Are women physically or physiologically more prone to be suffering from a sense of lack of normality every month, or men are more likely to go through that? We have already established quite nicely and fairly that because women have menstrual cycles, they go through this period every month.
Well, let's just remind ourselves that they only do this up until menopause, right? With James, again, I don't know if you brought that up in the moment, James, or whether that's something that you thought about before, but that was just so beautiful to bring up the menopause thing. And they didn't deal with that in any way. And it's now completely forgotten or overridden. And he's now making the claim that it happens every month. Well, only every month up till a point. What about those women after this? Right? Completely just overridden and forgotten that beautiful point you made. Was that something that you just thought of in the moment, or again, was that something you thought about before?
Just in the moment.
Yeah, I thought that was brilliant. There was there was a millisecond pause when you brought. In fact, there wasn't even a pause there because they were speaking over you, so they didn't hear the point at that stage. And then you did bring it up multiple times after that. And at Adnan's point, it was beautiful. I did say it earlier on, right? I don't know if you were here at the time. He said something like, "We're just going to carry on. We just." Some words that it was words that were of the view that we're just going to ignore that. He didn't use those words, but it was synonymous. We're just going to ignore that and carry on. So that menopause thing was just like a golden moment for you. And at no point did they ever attempt to deal with it. They explicitly sidestepped that. And he said, well, I'm talking about women that are menstruating, right? Or words to that effect. It was just, at no point did they ever come back to that.
James, did you ever consider to really, really bring this back to the Quran and say, listen, I'm sick and tired of talking about the side issue, which was just something to substantiate the claim. Did you ever think of doing that, or did you think you were going to get kicked if you did?
Well, I had one topic that I really wanted to bring it back to, but they have a sort of they're like, oh, answer the question. If you don't answer the question, you know, answer the question, and they won't let you get a word in edgeways. But the topic I did want to go back to wasn't specifically the Quran itself, but I wanted to like sort of make it clear to them, like, you know, why this doesn't make sense in the present day, and whether they would insist on if they did have their ideal kind of Islamic state, or they wanted more Islamic influence on the law, whether they would actually want to kind of do what the Quran literally says and say that, you know, all financial contracts, if you're going to have them witnessed, you need twice as many, you know, female witnesses as male witnesses.
Right.
And so, like, later on, I asked kind of like, you know, how does this make sense when we have like women lawyers, women accountants, and they're just as competent? And so I wanted to sort of like bring it really into the present day. And so I only got to do that a little bit, but you know.
Did you think of like really ridiculing them, but saying, well, today if a woman goes to the bank to open a bank account, does she have to do a menstruation test first, or something like that?
I stopped. Only you would say that.
Great. That would have been great. I didn't
probably get kicked off. Yeah, that's a good one. Again, you see the highlighted comment there. James, stop moving the goalpost. I don't know that these Muslims understand what moving the goalpost is. And I think they confuse James with Adnan in particular. But hey, it's regular that we see with some of these Muslims in the chat to be entirely confused. So that doesn't surprise me. I think that should have read Adnan there, but he just typed it's just a typo, because it can't actually be referring to you.
Whereby they don't feel normal, they are more emotional. Sometimes they may be irrational in some cases, right? So you have already established that. We have already agreed on that point.
Let's just ignore the thing about men. So we'll just go back to the women and say you've agreed on that. And if we say you've agreed on that multiple times, right, that'll hypnotize the audience that you're in agreement with us. We'll forget that you're in disagreement on other things. We'll just highlight the points that you are in agreement with, and we'll sidestep and ignore the points where we're on disagreement. And we'll just keep going back to that. This was the same thing that he did with you when I was there with you, James, in Speaker's Corner, right? I mentioned at the beginning, right, when you brought the inheritance stuff. At no point did he even remotely challenge the actual verses themselves. And then that other chubby one came in and asked, how many tafsirs have you read on this? It was just sophistry of the highest degree, right? So we know that this guy's an utter sophist. And it's like, how do you do? But you don't know who's going to speak, right? It might have been better speaking to Asadullah Ali, perhaps, or Sadat, but you never got that chance, unfortunately.
Therefore, that sense of lack of normality, to use my words carefully, that this is exactly what the Prophet is referring to. That's what
he's referring to the lack of intelligence, and you are trying to sugarcoat it and make it lack of normality. Why don't you just be intellectually honest? Because your Prophet said they are deficient in intelligence. Why are you not agreeing with your Prophet? And you're trying to sugarcoat it, because you know that anybody that's in the Western world will take a very dim view of this. So now you want to use rhetoric and quote unquote be very careful of your words.
That's what he's referring to. That women,
intelligence.
Let me finish.
There you go. He just said it himself, but he's just being overspoken. James himself said it's deficient in intelligence, right? Bringing that point back again. It's not just about normality.
Finish. You said they changed for the worse. Now, when you say worse, and you also mentioned something very interesting. I forgot the word. You used the words. You used those words.
You guys said it first, and then you tried to get him to agree with it. So don't make out as if James came up with this on his own. You guys kept insisting this was the case. And now you make it sound as if it's all James that is saying this, because he does not want to say that women are deficient in intelligence, even though that's what the hadith says. He doesn't want to say that. So he's couching his words and trying to make as if James is saying all of these things.
That they change, the emotions change, and they change for the worst. If that's the case, what does that constitute? When you say they change for the worst, does that mean the state of mind changes? What does change? The question is, what actually changes? What changes?
I said what changes in general.
Okay.
What changes is, them being more sensitive. That's one of the main symptoms.
Okay, when you said they change for the worst,
I think the one thing that can happen here, James, because they're trying to press you to say the word so they don't have to, right? It's only in retrospect that we get to see this. And I think one thing that can be said is, Adnan, you're leading somewhere. What do you think is going on here? You've made all of these claims and you've done all of this sort of stuff. what is your conclusion to this? Because if you say it, James, they can say, look, James said it, I didn't say it, but they're leading you to say what they don't themselves want to say, because then they can be accused of being misogynistic. So they're trying to get you to say it instead, so they don't have to take the fall for it. And maybe another way to do it is, okay, and then you're saying all of this, it's worse, it's worse. What is your conclusion to this? I'm not saying anything. What is your conclusion? You're getting to a point. What is it? Do you want to spit it out, or are you going to keep dancing around here? Because he has to say the words himself. You even said it was intelligence, but he wants to say, oh, it's not normal, or it's the worst, or whatever, but he just won't get to the point because he wants you to say it for him.
What did you mean by that? Change for the worst?
I mean, for instance, you know, being offended by things that would not normally offend you. Like, I consider that to be a change for the worst.
Okay, is that a normal situation?
By the way, can I make another point? That doesn't mean that they're less suited to be a witness in a financial transaction. For example, let's look at. Wait, can I finish this point, Hamza? I mean, let's just look at the fact that there are tens of thousands, maybe millions of women employed today as accountants and lawyers, and they have to bear witness to financial documents all the time. And I don't think anyone would say that women, on average, do this are less capable of this.
No, but look at his hand again. Look at his hand. Do you see Adnan's hand waving the hand there? Oh shit! But it's like a response from the human body. Fuck! And the hand just goes out waving there. This is of no consequence. That was a beautiful point you brought out there. These millions of women around the world are doing this all the time. Are they doing this, or do they suddenly stop doing this when they're on their cycle? No, the answer is clearly not. So what is going on here? And you brought it back here. This was great.
And the thing is, like, they obviously want to cut me off here because they don't want their audience to have a think about the fact that, you know, clearly the state of the world today shows that this teaching from the Quran and the Hadith no longer makes any sense whatsoever, and is no longer applicable. And so they don't want their audience to have to go through that cognitive dissonance. That's like dangerous to them. That's what they're here to try and somehow guard against. So
exactly right.
This is like danger zone. They need to kind of cut me off as soon as possible.
Exactly.
The most important point, I think, of maybe the whole conversation, and yet it's kind of like, you know, that you'll see what they try and do.
Yeah, no, that's great, right? The fact that you brought this up, you did get that point out, right? Yes, they're trying to cut you off now. Look at, they're both doing it, right? First, he's waving his hand like, I don't want you to say that. It's like a distraction technique when you wave a hand like that, especially if you're not waving to somebody to say hello. It's like an unconscious movement that one can easily take as being a distraction. No. You wave a hand to distract somebody from whatever's going on, because they suddenly follow the hand. Our eyes follow movements. That's kind of an evolutionary thing anyway. And so that's kind of a movement to do that, to distract people away. The hand does it. I do that with my dog because my dog is half blind now. So I have to wave my hand for the dog to see me. It's like, hey, I'm over here type of thing. And the hand is doing the same sort of thing. But you're right. That's exactly what they're doing. And they're both jumping in here now at the same time.
Another thing that we need to another thing we need to remember is he doesn't like James or you or me or anybody on the stream. So this is like a token. This is like a placeholder so that he can say, well, I allowed James to come on, but he failed miserably. But at least he was on there. We allowed him to make his point. He got all the time that he wanted. It's not our fault that he failed. So this is what they're looking at.
Yes. And we refuted him. We've rinsed him. We've sent him to school. All of the sort of, childish comments when, of course, nothing like that has happened. I mean, Dunning-Kruger would just have a field day. These guys should commit themselves to the Dunning-Kruger, sort of testing. They would go, oh man, you guys are like, you are the poster boys for this sort of, test that we're doing.
Before you go there, we're not discussing.
I haven't finished the point. Sorry. And yet Muhammad is saying in this hadith that by virtue of what it says in the Quran, i.e., chapter 2, verse 282, that this is evidence that women are deficient in intelligence. And so, I mean, how does this make sense in today's day and age when women are just as good at being...
Beautiful, right? How does this make sense, right? You asked a beautiful question. Do you think these guys are going to answer? What's the bet? Let's see.
It just doesn't make sense in our day and age when women are just as good at being accountants and lawyers and bankers. So
let me correct you there.
What makes sense here?
Women were given higher status than bankers and doctors and cashiers, even as early as the life of the Prophet. Aisha was one of the big...
Look how he distracts with a completely irrelevant point. Look how he distracts. He's not going to answer your question directly. He's going to distract and make it appear as if somehow women have the same or better rights than men. He's not going to answer your question directly, of course. But this is the strategy.
Also, one thing that his point even like undermines his own case, right? Because he's about to say, you know, women were considered scholars in Islam. You know, there were female scholars who were, you know, scholars in the religion. And yet, you know, if you're saying that women are capable of being scholars in religion, like the most important thing in like Muslim society is the religion and the preservation of the religion. And so you're saying women are capable of being scholars in this religion. And yet you're also saying that women do not have the intellect to remember the terms of a debt and witness towards it. Then this is just a plainly contradictory kind of state of affairs. Like, you know, so even he's about to give, I mean, I don't get to make that point because I think they're about to sort of kick me quite soon. I don't have much more time to speak, but even his defense kind of shows yet more the nonsensical nature of this Islamic teaching.
Yeah, you're still on for another 11 minutes, believe it or not. Yeah, I can hardly believe it myself. Look at the bottom comment here, right? This is the Muslims are against you before you even got going, right? Time to kick James out. He can come back next month, once every month, if you get my drift. This is from one of their, these people in green are his subscribers, whatever. They pay a monthly fee to get like their name in green and whatever the case is, right? So, and they get this little icon which they all just adore, right? It's so cute, isn't it?
And here we have our debates saying, I think you guys should seriously reach out to Modern Day Debate to set up something with EF Dawa, Hamza, guys. We tried. We tried. We offered any possibility, any way. We are totally flexible. We go anywhere to have a conversation with these guys. And they keep on running away. They very clearly said they will never speak to me, never, ever. Rob is allowed on there. James was, I think now they have a reason to also ban him, but he was welcome to go on there once. They're too scared. They will not allow this because they know that as soon as they have anybody there who knows Islam a little bit, they're stuffed. So this is why they're not interested in a debate where anybody else gets a say, anybody else gets 5 minutes of talking time.
Yeah, I mean, maybe we can attempt to put it to them to go on Modern Day Debate. We haven't asked that question. They certainly won't come on. Well, at least Hamza definitely won't, and I'm sure the others will make up some excuse.
I've asked them. I've said, listen, can we have a neutral venue and a neutral place? And nope.
Yeah.
The biggest teachers, if there was something wrong with women's intellect, if they were intellectually inferior, if they were considered to be mad or crazy or somehow less intelligent than men, then why was Aisha teaching hundreds of men? Why were they taking knowledge from her? So I'm making your point.
Were they doing that at Nan when she was on her menstruation as well? Well, of course, she was probably too young for that, at least at certain points. But were men doing that as well when she was on menstruation?
But
Rob, did she require somebody else there in case she made a mistake? Or was she somehow very special and no other woman was? What's your evidence for that? Or are you actually saying, as James said, that in fact women can be of high intellect at all times of the month? Or is it just certain women? What point are you actually trying to make here? What you aren't doing, of course, is answering James's question. But since you're going off on a tangent, we can deal with that tangent as well.
Rob, do you remember what I said right in the beginning? Remember when I said that he does not have anything from the Quran that says that there is an equal opportunity or equal standing for men and women? He is going to go and say, well, so-and-so said something and people believe this, and there you go. This shows that they would be equal. This is what I was talking about. That's exactly it.
I can't see it. What are you talking about? The verse you mean in red here?
No. I said in the beginning, when Adnan said, there are sentences in the Quran which show that men and women are on equal footing. And I said, no, it's not in the Quran. What he's going to do, he's going to come up with something where he says a woman said something and somebody believed it. And this shows that because they believed it, a man believed it. This means, and this shows, and this proves without a shadow of a doubt that women have the same standing as men.
Oh, right.
Here he's doing it. And here he's doing exactly what I predicted half an hour ago, or an hour ago by now,
Yeah, he's appealing to Aisha, right? He's appealing to one person as if that she represents everybody. Even if we granted she was somehow special, which of course they can't demonstrate. Well, she was special in that she was certainly Muhammad's young child as a bride and so forth. That she's got the dubious honor of being special in, but yeah.
You're making my point that women are appointed as lawyers and doctors. Women were appointed as teachers of religion by the Prophet himself. So what are you saying?
What is the Quran saying, you oaf? It's the Quran that says as soon as it comes to matters on financial area, women are deficient in their intelligence, and that is why you need 2 women and 1 man. That's the point the Quran is making. Don't you get it?
But I mean, I don't know what James is saying now, but as in like in the recording itself, right? But Adnan has now just agreed with James that that these women can do that. So that means that by today's standards, they don't need to do this. So would you agree, Adnan, that by today's standards, Surah 282 is no longer applicable because we have all these women, and by your own admission, they're all intellectually they're not intellectually deficient. So do you agree with that it's no longer, because that's ultimately where you said you wanted to go anyway, James, which is to get them to try and agree that, or at least to point out that this verse is no longer applicable by today's standards at the very least.
Yeah, but he's contradicting himself every 10 minutes as well.
Yeah, but he's just said that he agrees with James, but I don't think he understands the implications of what James was saying, but he's just agreed with it. But that's why it has to be made explicit, because otherwise the point gets lost here. Let's just see what James, if he gets a chance to actually respond to Adnan now.
You're making the point.
What I'm saying is just that.
Let me finish.
You did finish. You asked him a question, and now you're just steamrolling over. You asked him what point was he making, and now he's trying to make the point, and you're just steamrolling again. Can everybody see what's going on here? They're not actually asking for James to respond in any intellectually honest way. Right? They just want to make a point and then ask a question that seems to be rhetorical and then just carry on talking.
This goes to show that your understanding is completely misplaced. You have misconceptions, which we are trying to clear. Here the Prophet is talking about a specific state of mind. Okay? Why? How do we know that? Because in the same hadith, he talks about women having menstrual cycles and they cannot pray. And that he regards as a deficiency in religion. Is it a deficiency? He is talking about the ability. He's talking about the ability to be normal. He's not necessarily talking about lack of reward, because women, they don't lose any reward, by the way. When they're having menstrual cycle, we know for a fact in Islam that they don't lose their reward. Men are praying while women are not praying because they are going through menstrual cycle.
Give me the weather report in Australia.
Allah, God who created us, knows well that
this is all just sophistry and rhetoric, right? This is just to obfuscate the point, right? Because he asked James, so you agree with me, what point are you making? James tried to say something, and then off we go on this sort of rhetorical monologue here that isn't relevant to the point.
This is a very difficult period for women. So they have freedom from prayer. So different.
Can you see what it says at the bottom there? Non-Muslims are welcome to join the panel. StreamYard link is in the description. Well, after this sort of display here with somebody that does know what they're talking about, do non-Muslims really want to join this so that they can be railroaded and steamrolled over so these guys can do a propaganda job? Well, possibly.
Deficiency here doesn't mean actual deficiency in the sense that they lose reward. They're not losing reward. They are simply not in a normal state of being. And this is what
James is trying to imply it's saying that women are lesser than men because of this. No. It's just
yes.
James is not saying that. The Quran is saying that. And in fact, Muhammad is saying that. Like, were you not paying attention at all? Were you like in your own little world there? He's read you the hadith, and you guys, or at least Adnan is on his hobby horse here to try and justify why women are supposedly deficient in intelligence. But you notice he never says that word. He tries to dance around it by saying some other words instead. And when James brought up that women today, there's millions of women that do all of this sort of stuff, he agrees and then asks James, what point is he making? It's like they can't follow the thread of a conversation or a point that's being made. It's almost like, in this case, it's like you are speaking to children. You've got to reiterate it. Imagine that you are speaking to young children who are like, fiddling around and not concentrating. And then you've got to repeat the point over and over here because they can't follow this at all.
That's what James is trying to say.
But
and I'm glad you have brought this question up so that we can address it.
James, do you think women have a normal state of mind when they're pregnant?
It depends. Like, often there are mood swings then, sure.
Right. Let's be honest with you, James. You know nothing about women, do you?
Why is this relevant, right? Again, this is just Hamza's opaque attempt to try and undermine James's credibility. This isn't dealing with the Quran. Your man Adnan has attempted to deal with it and failed spectacularly, and now you're coming in with a completely different point, which is, again, you tried this earlier on, asking James if he knew where all the other hadiths were, as if he needed to be a mastermind. When you guys make vacuous claims, you don't back them up. And that's the thing I was saying, James, earlier on as well. It's something to remember. It's not easy to do in the heat, though, is to actually say to them, okay, you made a claim. Can you substantiate that? Because I don't agree with that, right? I don't know that that's the case. Can you show me, right? Because they get away with making claims left, right, and center, and they never have to substantiate it. Then you and any other interlocutor that comes on, they want to press and say, okay, well, show me where these other hadiths, or show me this, show me that, right? Show me that, you don't know anything about women, just to undermine the character, because they can't undermine sufficiently the argument.
Part of the reason why I try not to do that is because, like, obviously, kind of one of the points of benefit is to try and talk to the audience, have the audience hear what you're saying, and so if I kind of undermine kind of the credibility of these people, there's benefit to that, but like kind of I hope to try, like, I'm really trying to kind of trigger and poke at that cognitive dissonance and make them think, wow, really, does this really make sense? Is this really sensible guidance for a society to live by? And so if I kind of show that they're making a claim without a source or that sort of thing, then kind of it might make them think kind of, oh, I'll find a different Muslim apologist then, but it won't kind of like shake up the things that I'm kind of trying to go for. So I kind of let them get away with certain things, and I'll like treat their claims generously if I think unless I think it's kind of really sort of too far out there or gone or that sort of thing.
Yeah, okay, fair enough. So you've got a slightly different approach. I think you and I have got a very similar approach, which is we want the Muslims to think more about these things, to engage their brains and so forth. And so, like, it's a case of you trying that and I'll try a slightly different thing, but we're all of the same thing. I think Stops does to some degree as well, but I think he's just like so sick and tired of hearing the nonsense claims that, it's hard for him not to call it nonsense. And at that point, of course, it's just an excuse sometimes for these guys to keep people off. And that's why these channels are so biased, in favor of the, at this point, 5 Muslim guests. That's why I think on modern day debates, they wouldn't be able to get away with any of this.
I won't comment on that.
I'm going to say no, you don't. And what about women when they have a baby? Are you in the right state of mind then?
It's an emotional time when you're when you're delivering.
No.
But,
Do you know anything about Do you know anything about postnatal depression, James?
No, he doesn't.
That's something that exists, sure.
Right. So and we'll have menopause as well. Are women thinking straight when they're on menopause? Is their mind the same?
Well, sometimes they're like hot flashes or whatever, but I don't think that's a permanent state of affairs.
I want to clarify very quickly. Why are we mentioning these things? We are mentioning these things so that we can highlight the fact that women have certain physiological features men do not have. They are different. They are differently able. Okay, women have certain characteristics and qualities men do not have.
Thank you for telling us something that absolutely none of us knew. This is news to all of us. Thanks, Adnan, for bringing forth a trivially obvious point.
Yeah, but Rob, he's now admitting that what the Quran says actually has some merit. That, yes, indeed, women are deficient and require backup where 2 men don't have that. So he is incredibly sexist here, saying that, yeah, 2 men are okay, but the women are not, and that's why they need backup.
Yeah. Well, he has to say that, right? But he's trying to find a way to justify it such that it sounds acceptable to certain Muslim ears, right? In the Middle East, this wouldn't be a problem. They'd all be going, yeah, well, of course, right? But in the Western world...
But he's just accepted it. He's just clearly pointed. I would have jumped on this. I would have said, so you are saying there's a deficiency. So you are saying that women do need 2 women to match the intellectual capability of 1 man. So you are accepting all these things because that is what he's saying at the moment.
Which was James's original point.
And vice versa. So that's why different rules apply to them. So because this is a financial transaction taking place, in case one woman, I mean, this is how some of the scholars have explained, Islamically speaking, that the reason why there is a need for a reminder, in case one of the women is going through that cycle at that time, okay, and she's not feeling normal at the time, then maybe the other woman is. This is one of the reasons. This is one of the.
Okay, if that's the case, why do they need the man then? Why do they need the man if the other person's there? My mom was so irate during menopause. And what happens after menopause? They don't have the menstrual cycle anymore. So Thanks for telling us that. But if there is, and one woman is there to remind the other woman, what is the point of the man being there?
What if both women are on the period? Then what?
The explanations. This is one of the interpretations, right? But we don't have to go with that. We simply need to understand there are two men.
This is silly. This is totally silly.
When there are not, when two men are not available, then there is one man and two women. This does not mean that they are less than each other. How do we know that, Islamically speaking? Because chapter 35, chapter 35 of the Quran, sorry, chapter 33 of the Quran, verse 35, chapter 33, verse 35.
Can one of you guys just look this up? Because Hijab did this once and we found he'd misquoted it. So it's 33, 35. I can't do it at the moment. Can one of you guys just look up 33, 35 while he's speaking and just check if it is in fact what he's claiming, right? Because they make these verses up. We caught Hijab out with this, I don't know, about 3 or 4 reviews or 5 reviews ago, where he quoted verses. We stopped the stream and I was on both, I had another screen and we went to check the verses and he got it wrong.
Wasn't even in the Muslim men and the Muslim women and the believing men and the believing women and the obedient men and the obedient women and the truthful men and the truthful women and the patient men and the humble men and the men that give and the men and the men. Allah has prepared for them forgiveness and reward. So in other words, he's giving like 8 different examples of where men and women, this is again exactly what I said in the beginning, where people are saying that there's a man and a woman and they are capable of giving alms, they are also capable of being humble, they can guard their whatever and truthful, and this is absolute nonsense. This is just showing that a man and a woman are capable of doing certain things which are identical, which has no bearing on what is being said here.
What I'm trying to say is that this verse of the Quran shows that men and women gain an equal reward. But like, obviously, that's a red herring because I never claimed anything about rewards in the art. So yeah, it's just purely irrelevant.
Correct.
35 mentions women and men together in one long verse, whereby they are mentioned together equally, and the punishment and reward is mentioned together. Actually, it mentions the reward. So men and women in Islam are punished equally, Islamically speaking, when it comes to reward and punishment in paradise in the hereafter. So where is the lack of equality here?
Exactly where this was just pointed out. That's exactly what James is doing, you stupid idiot. You clown. This is exactly what is being said here. And then
Where's the inequality?
Or somewhere else it says something else. It doesn't matter.
In 282 it says it, Adnan. Have you not been paying attention? And in the hadith that you wanted to then claim is there's a reason why that's being said. It's being said in 282, which was originally James's point about 40 minutes ago.
Okay, so you're completely misplaced. I don't know whether it's you're not willing to understand or
the irony. Just let this irony linger in the air for a moment. These words now he should be ringing back in his own ears. The irony of this statement is just hard to ignore.
You don't want to accept these interpretations or these explanations, or you just want to be, you're hell bent upon your understanding and you don't want to change.
Very simple problem. You don't understand women. That's a problem.
Well,
yeah. I don't think you'd have a problem.
James, also consider this. Also consider this example, which Adnan alluded to.
See, he's made a long monolithic statement, which actually applies to him, of course. And now, of course, the other people jump in again. James is not able to respond to Adnan, right? This is just par for this.
I'm not sure if the actual reference was given or not, but he did allude to the fact that in other places in the Quran, men and women's testimonies are treated equally. And then there's another instance in the Quran where the woman...
As Stops quite rightly pointed out, where else in the Quran are their testimonies treated equally? And number 2, is it in reference to financial matters? If it isn't, then your point is moot.
Testimony is actually held even above the male's testimony. So that one, I just wanted to bring your attention to that in case it wasn't brought up already, is that's in chapter 24 of the Quran, right, which is called Surah Nur. So chapter 24, just read the first few several passages of that chapter. But the summary of that is that in a situation where the husband testifies that he saw his wife commit adultery, and she counter testifies, they both invoke the wrath of God on them if they're lying. So the man says, may I be like cursed by God if I'm lying. I witnessed her committing adultery. She does a counter oath and says that Allah's curse be upon me If I'm lying, I'm innocent. And so basically, there's a series of oaths and counter oaths, and at the end of it, her counter oath outweighs his oath. And so,
should I read this?
Yeah, go ahead, Stops.
So it's just, this is a surah which we have sent down, made it obligatory, and revealed the verses of clear evidence that you might remember. I'm reading the Sahih version, it's the easiest. Women and men found guilty of sexual intercourse, lash each of them with 100 lashes. Do not be taken by pity if you should believe the other. The fornicator does not marry except a fornicator or polytheist, and none marries her except a fornicator or polytheist, and that has made it unlawful to the believers. And those who accuse chaste women and then do not produce 4 witnesses, lash them with 80 lashes, and do not accept from them testimony ever after. Those are the defiantly disobedient, except for those who repent thereafter and reform. And those who accuse their wives of adultery and have no witnesses except themselves, then the witnesses of them shall be 4 testimonies, swearing by Allah, and that indeed he is fruitful. And the 5th oath, there is nothing here. There is nothing here about the exceptional quality of the female testimony. It's exactly what I said in the beginning. Somebody says that some woman says something and men do not bear to say anything against it because she has 4 witnesses. That's it. Nothing else.
By the way, might as well keep this comment up for any non-Muslim here. Just replace the word James with non-Muslim. Right? This isn't the right topic for you, James. As if this particular person, lady, let's say, has got the intellectual fortitude to say which, of course, but she's not deficient in intelligence, so we'll have to take that into account as well. But suggesting that this isn't the right topic for James, well, by all means, tell us what the right topic for James is. Lovely lady who's hopefully not on her menstrual cycle, otherwise she would be deficient into the Quran, right?
She's not considered guilty of adultery. So that's a situation where her oath has canceled out the oath of her husband. What's interesting about this situation is that it doesn't have to do anything with business. It doesn't.
Thank you. Well, what's the point of bringing this up then? Because James is talking about business. Thank you for bringing up an irrelevant point. Nice one, Sadat.
Have to do anything with business transactions. It doesn't have to do with a field that men would naturally know more about. It doesn't have to do with a field that women would naturally know more about. I mean, the man surely knows if he saw his wife committing adultery or not. She surely knows if she was committing adultery or not. So this is a situation actually, which is actually just concerned with the inherent honesty and trustworthiness of the person. So if anything, I mean, I'm just playing this for argument's sake. I'm not really.
Yes, you're just making up irrelevant stuff. Thanks a lot, Sadat, for bringing up stuff that's just wasting airtime.
Trying to put a feminist spin on the Quran, but if I was, I could say that these verses in chapter 24 show that the woman is inherently morally superior. She's inherently ethically superior.
Well, Stops just read it. We didn't hear anything about her being ethically and morally superior. Hey, look, you can take any interpretation you want, right? But if you're going to take Adnan's advice, you really need to, take just rewind to the back that he was supposedly pointing to James, and maybe that would apply to you, Sadat, as well. You can take whatever you want. Why are you taking that way? Is it just like you want to have your own thing and you're unprepared to hear any other advice? What's your story?
She's superior to the man. She's less likely to lie than the man. So you can spin it any which way you want. If you're not.
There you go. You can spin it any which way you want. Thank you, Sadat, for dropping the curtain and just revealing how you guys operate.
Not looking at it objectively, if you're not balancing things out, then you can take out any one passage of the Quran and spin it any which way and say, aha, you see, according to chapter 24, women are maybe not in matters of business. Okay, fine, we'll give that to men. But in matters of inherent morality, trustworthiness, women are superior to men. I don't actually believe that. I believe God is just being more merciful.
What did he just say? Yeah, we'll give that to men. Men are more cogent when it comes to financial matters. We'll give that to men. But anything else, women are okay.
What
and
was
this is the point
point
that James was actually coming there to go and say. This is exactly the point. So you are now admitting that what James brought up in the Quran is correct.
Brilliant.
But, yeah, he's trying to kind of have his cake and eat it at the same time.
Yeah, exactly.
Because, I mean, the reason he brought up this example was to kind of show, he's kind of saying, well, this is what you've done, and I can do the same thing. And if I do the same thing, then I'll come up with a kind of a wrong conclusion. And so therefore your method of reasoning is kind of invalid as well.
Yes.
But I bring up a couple of problems with his point. bring up one problem, and like I didn't have time to make another problem. But there's another even bigger problem with his point. It like doesn't make sense from a legal standpoint. But basically, kind of like the point to make. So he's trying to like slip in there that I've kind of taken something out of context or whatever, and yet I've looked at the historical context from his own fucking prophet, and the reports about what his prophet said this verse means. And so he can't say that I'm taking this out of context if I'm showing his own prophet saying, women, this shows that women are deficient in intelligence. And so, but he's trying to kind of like paint this picture of like, oh, when this kuffar says that and points it out, he's taking it out of context. He's just not thinking about this properly. But it's ridiculous kind of when you actually examine clearly. Like these people, they try not to make clear points often. They'll try to just allude to things. Because if you ask them to make a point clearly, then obviously it will be self-evident how bad their point is. So they work off by allusions rather than like, properly stated arguments with kind of clear references of how, their statements link together, that sort of thing. But anyway,
that's why. But James, that's why they hate the inheritance distribution error. They hate it because there it's clear cut. You cannot interpret it. You cannot allude. You cannot wiggle and waggle because it's 2/3. You cannot misinterpret 2/3, and that's why they hate it.
Oh, by the way, just on that note, I know it's a bit of a side note. I had that discussion, I think today, because I was driving. I had that discussion with a Muslim today. But he appealed to the Sunnah. He said the Sunnah is at the same level as the Quran, and if the Quran has got this, which he acknowledged was over 100%, then all you need to do is appeal to the Sunnah there, and there somewhere in the Sunnah he was claiming, well, you can actually get the community to come in and help out. So if this man his entire property is over 100%, well, that's okay because you can bring the community and they can give the other 12.5%.
And it's not in the Sunnah at all. It's not
no,
there.
I know. I know,
Funny.
but I didn't have it to hand and I was driving. But then, of course,
silly.
I'd done this before with some other Sunni Muslim, and I said to him, okay, so in this particular case, right, do you accept the Quran says that in this case women get a sixth, and do you accept in this particular case that the Sahaba say that the woman gets a seventh? He was, yeah, okay. So I said, okay, so here was the killer question, right? I said to him, which one are you going to select? His response, I'm not going to answer that because you're trying to pin me in a corner.
Exactly. Yeah.
I said, thank you very much. And I literally said, thank you very much. And I'll leave it there. And I just muted myself. And then the excuses started to come after that. And right. So that's a beautiful way, because I've done that before with somebody else. Once you get down to the numbers, because otherwise, as James points out, this is all sophistry. Well, the Sahaba, the scholars, they can interpret, they can explain the Quran. Once you get to the numbers, just ask them, what number does the scholars or the Sahaba come up with? What number does the Quran come up with? Get down to the actual numbers with that. And then it plays itself out. But if you don't get to the numbers, then they can use the sort of sophistry approach that we see here with Adnan and so forth, right? So just a side note, but that's another way to do it.
Yeah,
and that happened exactly today.
And that is the beauty of what James has just tickled out of here, showing exactly the tap dancing and the desperation when it comes to somebody sort of saying, well, here's what the Quran says. What do you think about it? And I'm sure James, listening to this, I think his hairline has moved up and back from all the face palms because it is so silly what we are being presented with here. It is so desperate and so childish that there is nothing there. And instead of just saying, okay, yes, you've got a point, it doesn't make sense, and today it's different, and just laughing it off and saying, okay, next point. No, they have to go and argue. They have to. They cannot help themselves. They need to argue about it, no matter how silly it is.
No, but Adnan's just a terrible interlocutor anyway. So let's just get to the end here. We're almost there. It's not long before James gets kicked off.
Merciful to the woman here, because her life is going to be ruined if she is falsely charged. So better for our Islamic courts to err on the side of caution. So if she's willing to make that counter oath, invoke the curse of God on her, okay, then fine. We accept your testimony. You didn't commit adultery.
So can I ask a question about that? Yeah. Is it not the case that if a woman were to accuse her husband of adultery, that the man could make the counter oath as well, and the same thing would happen?
To my knowledge, that situation is not outlined in the Quran. I don't know if that's outlined anywhere in the Quran. Adnan, is that?
I mean, I believe, like, if we're going by,
so that you just give him a high
issues, basically. And if we're going to ficky issues,
James, trying to grasp onto the wrong. We're dealing with what we're dealing with.
So they let Sadat bring up an irrelevant point. When James brings the counterpoint to Sadat, they want to close this down, right? This is just what they do. And even Hamza himself said to Sadat, you gave him something there to deal with, or words to that effect, right? So basically, shitting on his fellow Muslim who had been quiet all this time and decided he'd pipe up, but in the end of the day, gave James a chance to respond back and say, hey, well, man can do the same. And he didn't know one way or the other. And then Hamza wants to close that down.
Let me say one more thing about Sadat's response. So, basically, what normally happens with regards to accusations of adultery is that you typically, after kind of one of Muhammad's wives got kind of accused of adultery, Muhammad sort of came down with this new rule that from henceforth, kind of, you need 4 witnesses if you're going to accuse someone of adultery. Okay, and so he gave an exception to this because a man came and he said, I've seen my wife committing adultery. Are you telling me I can't accuse her, or else I'll kind of be whipped? Because Muhammad said that if you accuse someone of adultery without 4 witnesses, then you will get whipped instead of you'll get the punishment essentially. And so a man then came to Muhammad and said, well, hold on, I've seen my wife and someone else in bed, and you're telling me I kind of can't accuse her. And so then he came up with an exception whereby if you kind of as a husband, and in most schools of Islamic law say, and also if you're in the wife in this position, but if you as a husband see your wife committing adultery and there aren't any other witnesses apart from you, then you can make an oath saying, I swear by God, I've seen my wife committing adultery. And she can, and according to Muhammad, he says that she can also make an oath saying, well, I swear by God that I did not commit adultery. And so basically both your kind of unsubstantiated, both your oaths on God kind of cancel each other out. And so no punishment is applied. And so he's saying that this favors the woman, but so you heard that he said this is taking the woman's side and saying that her oath is kind of considered more valuable, and you can infer that this means women are more trustworthy and moral, that sort of thing. But that's not the case, because you remember that Muhammad said that any person who accuses their wife of adultery without 4 witnesses, they should be whipped. And so really, kind of, if the woman's oath was kind of considered worthy, under normal circumstances, this man should be whipped. And yet kind of he's being saved from that sort of outcome. And so kind of this example he's bringing doesn't actually favor the woman. It's actually kind of excusing the man from his his actions, because normally if a man kind of makes this accusation, then he should be whipped because he's making the accusation without 4 witnesses. And so his example of how women are being favored here doesn't actually work. It's actually an exception that allows the man to kind of be saved from the kind of outcomes that would normally happen. So his point doesn't work. But by the way, when I do sort of give a sort of an explanation about Islamic law, I'm not trying to say that Islamic law makes sense. It's very kind of contradictory and inconsistent. But I'm just following one particular line of reasoning and showing how kind of according to other Islamic teachings, it conflicts. This isn't to say that kind of there is it's that this is a sensible system that makes sense. Not at all. There are tons of different contradictions, but that's what you'd expect from any system that's kind of made up on the fly by some guy over a period of 20 years. So
good one.
Well,
that was just adding a point for the people at home to learn.
Let's not
it's
go
got
down
nothing to do with your issue. Here was your original claim, and we're going to vote here. You came on and said it doesn't make sense. Why would 2 women have to come, one remind the other? Well, we've just demonstrated why it does make sense, because women have times in their life when they're not thinking straight, and Allah in his wisdom knows this, and therefore he's catered for all women, not just the lawyers and bankers, but all women.
Okay, so his summary is that he's catered for all women. The women for whom this does not apply, well, too bad on them, right? So instead of catering only for the women to whom this does apply, Allah, in his infinite or apparently infinite wisdom, has catered for women for whom this does not apply, i.e. those after menopause and those who who are not affected. And that includes millions of women today. So thank you very much for letting us know. Yeah, carry on, James.
And he's also tacitly admitting, he's tacitly claiming or implying here that Allah is catering for all women, and that therefore kind of all women are sort of deficient in intelligence or have this have less reliable kind of memory with regards to financial contracts. So he's kind of like making the original point for me, like by saying he's catering for all women. He's saying that like yeah, in general, women kind of are less reliable in their mental faculties of like memory and that sort of thing.
Yeah, and interesting enough, obviously, Adnan tried for half an hour to try and say that there was a reason why that's the case.
The housewives, the one who works in the mill, or whatever it may be, the secretary. The whole point is this: Allah in the Quran doesn't just speak to professional women; it's for all women. Alhamdulillah. And why? Because Allah knows the nature of woman better than you, obviously. And thus, because of these things outlined by Brother Adnan, alhamdulillah, with regards to the menstruation, and you brought the hadith from the book of menstruation, which now shows the expertise of Bukhari for putting it in the book of menstruation, because it's relative to it.
You see how that point now comes back a little bit here, whereas, and obviously you only had that particular one at the moment, but had you brought the one from the, what was it? The accounting.
Zakat.
Zakat, yeah. They may not have gone down this road, right? It only appealed to Adnan after you had said it, right? Because this was thinking time for him, right? They were just floored by this because there was a silence when you brought this hadith initially, and then he wanted you to read it, so they had time to think, and then somehow it came up. And so it's a good one next time to not bring up that particular one, and bring up the same one in Zakat, and that would have, because now he's thinking that that's somehow an extra point against you. Well, hey, you brought up one. It's kind of like he wants to try and infer that you kind of refuted yourself, because hey, it's like you've read this verse and it's now obvious because we've quote unquote explained it to you that women are deficient, and therefore there's this good reason to accept 282.
And it
So now for you to come on and make the claim it makes no sense for a woman to maybe have two witnesses after hearing all of this, I'm going to call out you for being intellectually dishonest. Now,
well, of course you are, because at no point here were you following the argument. At no point has Adnan actually dealt with this, and you've hand-waved away menopause, and you've hand-waved away the problems that James has brought up with men. So at your point, again, it doesn't matter what somebody else says here. This is unfortunately the point with Hamza. Adnan could have gone blah, 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 literally, and Hamza would have gone, see, he's answered you, James. What are you doing here? You've been answered. That's how close it is, and I'm only half tongue-in-cheek with that.
Now, do you accept now that it kind of could make sense based upon what we've said today?
It doesn't make sense in this day and age.
I knew you were going to say that, James.
Because
I knew you were going to say that. Next time.
There you go. Right? There you go. This tells you everything about the stream. I'll finish off, and then I want James and Stops to have the last word here. This tells us everything we need to know. If you don't agree with me at the end of this, because we've given you this supposedly overwhelming, and here's Hashim laughing here as well, we've given you this overwhelming evidence by our lights because we can't really make sense of things. And if you don't agree with us, well, then you're off the panel. That should tell you everything you need to know about this. James wanted to make a point as to why he doesn't agree with it, and instead he was kicked off. Again, if you're watching this, and even if you're a Muslim, hopefully if you are Muslim, I'm appealing to Muslims to watch this. Hopefully you find other people to watch. And we've actually had people in text, and Stop Spamming has found one, and we found one or two in this text as well, who are starting to see through this intellectual dishonesty of people like Hamza, Redbeard fella here. Because this is all about propaganda. And if you just don't agree with him, well, then you're just being dishonest here. Whereas we've pointed out time and again in this entire review how disingenuous and especially dishonest this Adnan Rashid is. And on that note, I want to pass it over to James and Stops to give over their final words.
Yeah, like so I kind of went on the stream sort of thinking, well, it can be hard to kind of sort of, I know, like it's hard to have a proper conversation because they have the mute button and they can dogpile. And so like what's the topic that I could kind of choose that even their apologetics would kind of expose them and like show a fault line between what they're trying to sell for society and what kind of normal people would actually want for society. Because I think deep down, a lot of the Muslims who kind of support them, if they really had to take a long look at kind of a traditional Islamic law, and this is kind of one example of the ramifications of traditional Islamic law, they would have to admit that they kind of don't actually want to live like that. And so kind of the topic here was to try and sort of put on display kind of the fault lines between Islam and kind of civilization and the modern world, and So yes, some it's kind of like, sometimes you have an interviewer, right, who will ask a question which will kind of make them take a stand, which will either kind of expose them or it will kind of betray them in some way. And so they have to try and answer the question, and whatever answer they give, like, if they answer it honestly, then that will kind of expose them. And if they answer it dishonestly, then like kind of they'll have to like sort of that'll like be bad for them as well. Like their crew will kind of punish them, or they'll have to kind of reject some part of their religion that they don't want to sort of reject. And so that's what I was trying to go for here. And the two things I do differently was I try to kind of bring it back to like the real world effects. Like, so would you today kind of want to say that female testimony is like half as reliable in financial matters? Like, I'd ask them that kind of question, trying to like get a clear response from each of them on that issue. And the other thing I try and do is when they're doing this kind of question and answer thing, like, they do it to try and like give them some space and take like a sort of try and make it more like a debate, and so that it's almost removed from the real world outcomes and the real world attitudes that would like result. And so I kind of got sucked into debate mode a bit too much, whereas I would kind of try to kind of I would have preferred to kind of keep it more about, well, how are we going to apply this today? Does this make sense to apply today? Like, what do we know about the capabilities of women and men today? Are their memories really half as reliable as men, like Muhammad says, and like the Quran implies? And so that's their victory. They managed to kind of make it like a sort of typical kind of debate that's a bit sort of like theoretical and like talking about kind of this and that. But so they managed to kind of get me there, but I think they still kind of expose themselves on other things.
Good. Stops.
Yeah, I'm just trying to see what was this? It was 282.
282, wasn't it?
Chapter 2, verse 282. Yes.
Chapter 4 doesn't have that many. It stops at 176.
Chapter 2 stops. Chapter 2.
Oh, two. Sorry. Then I got it wrong.
You haven't had your beer in hand there.
I'm just because I'm pulling up the tafsir at the moment to see what they are saying, and they are agreeing with exactly this. Okay, now what I see is that you can bring up basically anything in the Quran. And James found a brilliant passage which shows that if you apply what it says in the Quran into everyday life, it simply doesn't make sense. It simply tells you that the Quran was written for the people 1,000 years ago in a different area, in a different place, different conditions, different societal structures, different culture, different everything, which simply is not applicable today. And this was a brilliant demonstration of what happens if you confront the people that want to go and protect this kind of thinking, that it fails completely as soon as, and this is why the ending statement was actually quite correct, because if you go and you apply this into the society today, it fails miserably. And that is what we've seen. There is no way that you can in any way protect or argue or in any way do anything with the statements that were made in those days into that time and era and place and everything. It simply does not work. And that is what we've seen today. And these, okay, granted, these people are really not really intellectual giants. I don't know what somebody would bring up who has more brain cells, but I don't think that they would be able to to rescue this at all. So thank you, James, for doing that. I hope that people have learned something, number one, about the tactics, number two, possible retorts, answers, reactions, and things like that. This is what we are trying to do.
So on that note, I would like to thank James. I'd like to thank Stops. Thank you, all the live viewers here. And if you're watching this afterwards, thank you for taking the time. If you got all the way to the end, we hope it's been educational, a little bit entertaining, and it's certainly opened your eyes even more to some of the tactics and some of the critiques that you can bring to Islam as well. On that note, thank you, gentlemen. We'll be back again at some point with another review at some point when Stops and I, and if perhaps James or anybody else is available, we'll do that. But that's on an ad hoc basis. So make sure you're subscribed, and we'll see you again next time. Good night and take care.
Thanks, guys. Bye.